Hello everyone, welcome to the Line Go Show. My name is Redline VA, and with me is my partner in crime, Pragmatic. And of course, we will be your host for this evening. A couple of things before we start. Obviously, this show is being streamed live and it's being recorded so that it can go onto YouTube later. So if you call in, that is basically giving us the right to use your liking on YouTube without you getting mad, angry, pissed off, and DMCAing us. So just want to throw that out there. The topic for tonight will be thought crime. Is it really crime? Well, to help me figure that out is, again, my partner in crime, Pragmatic. Pragmatic, are you there?
Oh, yes, I am. I know I've been pretty absent in the show lately, so I figured, hey, what the hell, let's try one out.
Yes, why don't you take a moment and actually explain to these people why you have been so cruel as to make yourself absent so that we can't indulge ourselves in your presence.
I'm generally a quiet guy, so either I'm on the show and not speaking because, hell, everyone else is handling the topic pretty well, or I'm not on the show because, honestly, I think I can't really contribute much to the show for that particular day.
I see.
Other than that, yeah.
I see. So anyway, to help us with the thought crime conversation, I will be inviting a guest. So let me go ahead and invite him in right now and get this show on the road. Second, let's see. Hello, sir. Are you there?
Hey man, how you doing? I'm doing good. I'm here.
All right, perfect, man. So as you know, this will go back to what we were talking about previously on the topic of thought crime. I think you remember that. So again, with me, Pragmatic, so we can discuss this thing. But anyway, if you can go over briefly, and please tell me if I'm putting this all on you at once, if you can briefly explain why you think a thought crime is in fact a crime or is in fact immoral.
Are you asking me or Pragmatic?
You.
Okay, so, we probably better start off by figuring out what we're talking about when we say a thought crime. So that's going to be my first question, is what do you mean by a thought crime?
Well, generally, when we consider thought crime, we're considering the idea of having bad thoughts or lustful thoughts, as an example. The fact that you've thought, let's say you had like a pornographic image in your mind, that would be considered a thought crime in some moral laws, which to me seems absurd because that's not hurting anyone. And ultimately, if your end action has not reflected that thought, then obviously something has interfered between the act and the thought and has coincidentally caused you not to act immorally. So essentially, you're not immoral in that area.
Okay, so like a thought crime isn't just a belief. I mean, a thought crime would extend over things like lusting, or indulging in hateful thoughts about someone. Is that right?
Exactly.
Okay, cool. So yeah, most Christians, right, are going to say that, look, you can do these things. They're not just beliefs; they're full-blown actions, where it's not just, hey, I see someone and they look attractive and I notice that. It's that a person actually intentionally indulges in that, and that's what's called lust. And similarly, if someone someone can do the same thing, like I mentioned a second ago with hate. You can indulge in that, and that's a choice that you can make. You're free to do it or to refrain from doing it. And right, so Christians want to say that, look, if you indulge in that, if you do those things, then you've done something wrong. And I think that makes perfect sense to me. If you're asking why I believe it, I guess I could approach that in two different ways. On the one hand, it does make sense to me to say that that's actually a wrong kind of thing to do. That's something that someone ought to not do. And that's just something that as I sort of search my conscience and I think about these things, that just kind of rises up as making sense. That's something that someone ought not do. Alternatively, we also have
Hold on a
testimony.
second.
Go ahead.
Before we go on, I just had a question. By indulging in that thought, what do you mean by that?
I mean that it's not just that the thought pops in your mind, because that's not wrong. That's not something you're free to do or to refrain from doing. But what you are free to do, I think, at that point is to, like I said, indulge in it. So obviously we know the difference between, so we see this man and his wife is super attractive, and we're noticing that, and we have a choice at that point to lust after her, or to refrain from doing that. And that's different from just the first stage, which is just noticing.
Okay, so you were going to go on to an example. I'm interested in hearing that.
I was saying there were kind of broadly two reasons why I think that it's wrong. One, I cited just sort of conscience, and second, I was going to cite testimony from Jesus Christ, no less. So if I have good reasons to think that God exists and God resurrected Jesus from the dead, vindicating him, then I would take Jesus's teachings, moral teachings, pretty seriously. And I think there's good reasons to think that Jesus taught that these types of things can be sin, and so that's sort of my second avenue, my second way to quote unquote know, at least from my perspective, that it's wrong.
Okay, and we'll just assume that anyone watching the show has at least a general knowledge of what Jesus teaches. So if they don't, they can look it up, just to move things along. Now, you mentioned that when you indulge in it, this is going past, obviously, the conscience, correct?
Going past the conscience?
As in, you've already made your decision on what you want to do, or is this actually during the process of weighing your options? You have two choices. You can indulge in it.
So someone can know that, or even believe that, doing one of these things is wrong and nevertheless choose to do it. So the conscience issue's separate. That had to do with the question of whether or not it's wrong, because you asked, Redline had asked, why do I believe that we're calling it a thought crime? I didn't think that was how thought crime was traditionally conceived, but assuming that these things that I'm talking about are thought crimes, then I'm explaining why I believe that they're thought crimes.
Fair enough. So essentially, let's say there's a woman out walking down the street, and I get bored and decide to imagine myself doing all sorts of crazy things with her. You consider that a thought crime?
Right.
All right.
How we've defined it, right.
Now, may I ask why that would be considered dangerous thinking?
Well, when you say dangerous thinking, we're just defining a thought crime not necessarily as something quote-unquote dangerous, but as morally wrong.
Well,
so I don't think that something has to be dangerous in order to be morally wrong.
Then if it's not dangerous, what would it be?
Morally wrong is all I wanted to say.
Yeah, but what would be the objective of this morality if danger is not really involved?
The
Nothing's
objective?
Well, if you're just going to say I have a morality and you're not going to define it as having any sort of purpose or goal in mind, this code, then it's meaningless. So if you're going to state that it's not dangerous in any way, but it's still immoral, the way I've understood it, that kind of destroys the whole idea of even calling it morality. There's got to be something being violated, and some sort of goal or purpose that this morality is guiding us towards that is being put to risk.
Okay, so I agree that something is violated. I'm not saying something isn't violated here. I think that there's a duty we have to refrain from lusting that gets violated when we do lust. But I don't think in order for it to be wrong, in order for me to have in order for it to be wrong, that it has to be, dangerous in the process. I wasn't quite sure what you were saying. It's earlier.
Well,
it sounds like you think maybe there's a goal. You think there's some, for any type of morality, there's some particular, goal that you can pick out that all of the, moral duties sort of point towards, I guess. Is that what you're trying to say?
Well, let's take an example. Some say that the moral law that God has established helps us understand what is necessary to get into heaven. And so, in a sense, if it's going to violate our chances of getting to heaven, it is in some way displeasing to your God. Now, if your God has set certain standards or certain expectations of mankind on the way they should act and behave, you would think it'd be at least reasonable for us to see a practical, some sort of practical reasoning behind this, and at least be able to have us be able to comprehend it. And not just have us go, oh, okay, well, that's wrong. I'm not going to question why it's wrong. It just is. We should be at least able to have this functionality to say, oh, so that's why we shouldn't do it. And this idea of thought crime, to me, doesn't explain why we shouldn't do it.
Well, you say there must be some practical reasoning. It sounds like...
Well, yeah, of course. If it's not practical, why do it?
Well, when you talk about practical, it sounds to me like you're sort of conflating, hypothetical imperatives with what I'm wanting to call categorical imperatives. So, hypothetical imperatives are sort of like, what you ought to do if you want this other thing over here. But that's not what I'm talking about. That's not how I think most Christians are going to conceive of moral duties. They're going to think of those as categorical imperatives. Some things are just wrong, full stop. It's not like they're wrong for some further reason.
But that doesn't really make sense, honestly. To just state it's just wrong is meaningless. It doesn't answer any questions.
Well, I don't think that's right. That seems, pretty cross-culturally, you have folks who believe that there are things which are morally wrong, which they can't necessarily tie together into some grand reason.
Can you give an example?
Well, so let's say you've got a culture who just sees absolutely nothing valuable in other human beings or outside of their tribe, right? So their tribe is really all that matters whatsoever, and they can still think that, for instance, that torturing someone from another tribe is wrong, even though they don't value them. Even though they don't necessarily value those persons at all, there's not necessarily any grand scheme that would lead them to think that they should adopt this moral value that they ought not torture someone from another tribe.
Okay, but you're saying that has no practical merit to it. That obviously torturing people from other tribes will in no way protect your tribe.
Well, even if it would protect the tribe, all that's relevant is that the person who is refraining from doing the torturing, that person doesn't notice that it will protect their tribe. They don't see any practical benefit at all. It's just a matter of conscience.
But I'm pointing out a practical.
Yeah, but they don't.
Showing you that there is a practical.
Well, yeah, but that doesn't matter. All that matters is that they don't notice it. And I could modify the scenario. Let's say it's the last person, from some particular tribe, and there's not going to be any practical ramifications from torturing them.
Now, there's going to be a particular word that I'm going to find interesting in this topic that might help unravel this sort of circle. Malicious intent. Now, when you have malicious intent, you have the intent of, particularly causing trouble, causing harm to another, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, if I have... Okay, first off, with morality, your example shows a malicious intent, correct?
Mm-hmm.
All right. The way I see it is, if malicious intent is not involved, then it is not immoral. Would you agree or disagree with that?
If malicious intent isn't involved, no, I don't agree with that.
Okay. So you believe morality stems further than, protecting and, or harming people or doing, what do you call it, a negative effect on people?
Well, yeah, and hold on. We didn't really finish our last conversation because now this doesn't fit well with what you were saying.
Well, now I'm asking you questions to make sure if it's relevant or not. If you don't agree, obviously, with my view, then it wouldn't be relevant. If we're both going to agree with this, then I actually could tie it in. Didn't you assert earlier
that in order for something to be wrong, it has to tie back into some
practical means?
Benefit?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So what about in this picture I just painted? There's no practical benefit involved in avoiding torturing this last person from a tribe when there's no negative effects afterwards from it.
Well, you could have psychological intents, or psychological effects that can happen from a person doing particularly heinous, or you could say disgusting or gross. There's those sort of words in there. Actions.
So what I can just stipulate that there are no psychological effects, or I can talk about a person who's been torturing people for a long time and it just has no effect on them.
Yeah.
Now, it would still be wrong for him to torture that last person.
Sorry. Say that again. I apologize. Over-talking.
Oh yeah. So I can modify the thought experiment so that I just don't have to. I can modify it as I need to in order to.
Well, that's true.
Make it,
you can.
In order to make it such that there is no practical detriment involved in the
However,
torturing of another
can you
human
modify
being.
it for this? The guy, if he's torturing people, and there's no particular reason for this torture, because you're probably going to modify it so there's no particular reason for the torture, correct? And yet he's wasting that time of his, which he could be doing to benefit his society in even better ways. That in itself is a practical reason for why they should not do it.
Well, then then I'll just say this. So look, it's kind of like the Roman Colosseum, where actually people, the whole tribe, it brings the tribe together, where he's torturing, this last member of this other tribe, and it actually results in the great good of the tribe in question, because it brings them all together. People who weren't friends before are now friends, and the person who was doing the torturing has just gotten, newfound respect. He's now a man. I can say stuff like that.
Well, actually, that example fails because those people had a particular interest in the torture. That's the only reason why it was successful. If the people had no interest in the torture, if this was some person they'd never met before, why would they cheer him on?
So okay. So two things. So one, I mean, would you so we're talking, on the one hand, we were talking about practical benefit. There was no practical benefit involved in the torturing of this individual. And in this latest, permutation, there is a practical benefit. And of course, in one sense, even without the community getting together, in order for this individual to perform the torture in the first place, even on his lonesome, there would have been some type of benefit involved. In other words, he must have enjoyed it or something.
Oh, no. Just enjoyment has nothing to do with morality. Just because you enjoy it does not make it moral.
So that
we all would
would
agree.
fall
That's
under
absurd.
practical benefits?
Yes, but not all practical benefits are moral. But your moral code has to have some practical means. For example, a society can develop a moral code because that moral code is practical towards their survival. You obviously don't want to kill anybody in your own tribe and have that just, hey, let's just kill whoever we want, because eventually you might actually kill everybody in your tribe. You're not going to want people to rape women off the streets, because now you're going to have a bunch of problems with people with their safety, pregnancies that are hard to keep account with. Bunch of problems can arise from that. You can see from a lot of moral codes and laws that there's a practical reason for each moral law.
All right, we're going to stop right there because I want to invite somebody on. And so first caller in, let's see if he has anything to add on. Let's see. Hello, sir.
Hello.
How's
How
it
about you
going?
introduce yourself?
Hello. I'm doing well. How are you guys?
Doing well. How about yourself? If you want to briefly introduce yourself, your channel, and anything like that, please be my guest.
Okay. Well, I'm Essence of Thought. I'm a YouTuber, of course. Atheist vlogger. I do videos looking at the Abrahamic religions, so that's Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Mormonism, etc. So that's the main gist of it.
All right. And so what about this do you have? Or anything you would like to add on?
I came in listening a little bit late, so I'm a little bit lost compared to other people. So.
All right, then.
Well, the
never mind.
topic is the topic's on thought crime. We were discussing the idea that is thought crime actually a crime, or is it absurd?
Mm-hmm. Well, thought can be an innate process. It's spontaneous. You can't exactly control it. So to have thought as a crime is to go against everything human. The best example of this is in the playground. Your friend comes up to you and goes, "Oh my God, really disgusting thing last night. I heard the elderly couple next door having sex." Immediately, you picture it in your head. You don't want to picture that. Don't deny it. You do not want to picture that. But you have to, because it's a spontaneous thought. You can't control that thought. So it's very difficult to call that spontaneous thought a crime because you have no control.
To sort of bring you up to date, he did agree with the fact that uncontrolled thoughts do not count as a thought crime. But he's stating, for example, if you see a beautiful woman walking down the street and you decide to entertain yourself for a little while, imagining yourself having lots of fun with her, that would be a thought crime.
But how do you control that? Because part of that's your innate biological process going off.
Hmm.
Is that where
Can
we
you
want to take
further
this?
on that? Oh, I'm sorry. Ask your question again.
I was just going to say that's one way this conversation could go. I mean, it would be a pretty big, I mean, it's not a tangent. Well, it is a tangent, but I mean, it's a relevant tangent. It would just be a really big one, and that's whether, free will, libertarian free will, is even possible, or if we have it. But I don't know
We
if that's
might
what you want to talk
touch
about.
at it every now and then, but it's not necessary to go into that. Like you said, it's a topic on its own.
So for now, let's just stipulate that because that's, that we're talking about the coherence of my worldview, at least. And on my worldview, we have libertarian free will. And while, some of these thoughts like you're talking about, like, noticing that woman is attractive, you can't control that, but you can make the choice. It seems for all the world like you can make the choice, and I want to say you actually do have the choice to engage in that or to refrain from engaging it. You can be sort of torn between doing one or the other, and you can choose to do it, and that would be wrong. I on my view.
So are you talking about actually acting on and pursuing the woman, the act of pursuing the woman, or are you on about just entertaining the thought of the woman?
Sorry, say that again?
Are you on about the act of pursuing the woman is wrong, or the entertaining the thought of the woman is wrong?
I didn't...
He's asking this. Is it just the thought that's wrong, or are you saying that after the thought, performing the action is what makes it wrong?
Right, it's the latter. The thought, kind of like you said, Peter...
But then that's no longer a thought crime. That's the act, that's the crime.
Yes.
Right, and that's why we had to stipulate this earlier. I said at the beginning that we're calling this a thought crime, but I mentioned that's not traditionally what I would call this. I'm more like you. I think it's more of it's a particular kind of action.
Well, that's the whole thing.
In Matthews, Jesus states the moment that you lust for a woman, you have committed adultery in the heart. That was kind of the discussion.
Yes, that is. That's actually our first example we brought up.
Are you talking to me?
Yes.
Okay.
First thing brought up was adultery. You committed adultery with, this immoral thought.
Right. Well, my view is that just noticing that someone is attractive isn't lusting. It's the indulging in that thought.
Is that it?
Yes.
Okay. Because you just now mentioned that an action must be taken.
So when you notice that a woman is really attractive, you might be tempted to lust after her at that point. And you can make a choice whether or not to do that.
Yeah.
And we're saying it's not really lusting in, by lusting, you're just saying the thought of it, correct?
No, I mean, well, it depends. So I'm distinguishing...
Lust is an impulse. Your impulse to lust, like hunger is an impulse. Eating is the action. Sex is the action. Lust is just the impulse. You want that. You have the urge.
Exactly. That's how I understood it, but that's not how you're actually using it, Gnarly.
So are you saying, so the thought can give rise to the impulse, or you can even say it's synonymous with the impulse, and then you have the choice to engage in that afterwards or to refrain from it?
But the moment that you choose to engage in it, it stops being a thought crime because you're actually going out and you're acting upon it. Then it is an action. It's no longer the thought or the impulse.
Well, right, and that's why, Peter, I actually agree with you. That's why I was kind of hesitant to use this term thought crime, But I figured, you know what, it's not that big of a deal because we're very carefully stipulating what we mean by a thought crime. And I think what they, they're using it in the sense that, look, as you continue to lust, it's still a mental thing. It's still purely going on in your mind. And in that sense, it's a crime. It's a mental crime. It's a purely subjective mental crime. And that's sort of, they're using the term thought crime in like a really broad sense, an orthodoxly broad sense like that. But, it's just a term, and we can work with it.
Well, could you give me another definition of thought crime other than, the actual act of thought being criminal or deviant?
Well, would you say that the continuing to lust after the woman, is that a thought?
It's an impulse. I mean, do you control who you lust after? Do you control who you want to be with, etc.?
Well, yeah. I'm going to typically say that if it seems like you have the choice to lust or to refrain from lusting, that you actually do, more or less have that choice. So, what situations I'm talking about. You can easily imagine Christians being in that situation where they notice someone and then they have to convince themselves, no, I shouldn't do that. So in those types of situations, let's talk about someone who chooses to lust. So they've entered into that situation, they're in that moral dilemma, and they say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and do it, and they start lusting at that point. As they're lusting, they're still thinking, they're still, it's still going on in the mind. So in that sense, you can still call it a thought. And so there's your other definition, is that a person can continue, it's not just an idea, a thought popping into the mind. It's actually something that you're willfully engaging in, but still willfully engaging in from the mental world. So
I'd have to disagree on your aspect of being able to control your lust. I'm, part of the LGBT community, and when I first, found out that I was bisexual, I was extremely, I had used gay as an insult, etc., and I despised myself. Yet I had no control over who I longed to be with, who I loved, who I lusted for, etc. That was completely out of my control. If I was fully capable, I would have been able to to prevent a lot of grief that I ended up having. I would have, saved myself a lot of sadness and despair if I'd been able to no longer lust for people of the same gender. So,
and to further up on your point, let's say, I take it you actually were concerned about the fact that you were homosexual at the time, correct?
I'm actually bisexual. It's just I don't.
Or bisexual.
Certain people, certain guys I fall for, certain girls I fall for. There's one guy at one time that I really fell over for, and there was a lot of concern, and
Yeah. Now, did you do anything at the time to address the situation, like ask other people for help or advice?
This is kind of tangential. I don't know if that's...
Oh, no, it's relevant.
All right,
It's just because you're stating that I could have controlled my lust, when no, I was in complete despair, depression, anxiety of people finding out who I was. I could have been saved all of that if I was capable of making a conscious decision on no longer lusting for these individuals.
I'll save us some time, guys. I don't disagree. I'm not saying, and I don't believe that it's possible for, what you're saying right now, Peter, is something that I'm quite okay with. It's perfectly all right on my worldview that there are people out there who are attracted to the opposite sex, and they're just biologically wired that way.
Talking about if I could save myself a lot of pain, I would have done so.
Well, how is that supposed to be a problem for my worldview? Because
you stated that you could control who you lusted or longed for.
No, okay. I think you can. I don't think you can change who you long for, but I think you can change who you lust after.
Here's the thing. What Peter pointed out, or maybe indirectly did, is the idea that if you have certain thoughts that you're not sure are healthy, and you go out and find out if they're healthy or not, and make an attempt to maybe even change yourself in some way to get rid of them. Oh, I'm having thoughts about raping my mother. This seems a little odd. I'm going to go ask someone about this. And they say, oh, that's not actually healthy. It's not normal. Have you ever, and they'll ask some questions to see if it's actually dangerous. And then they might even help, give me some program or advice to correct that thought. Now, that very thought I had didn't really commit a crime. In fact, my behavior from that thought shows quite the opposite. It shows me as a moral person who's concerned about my morality and wants to make sure I don't make immoral acts. So the fact that now I am committing a crime that resulted in a good act, that makes no sense.
Wait, sorry, what are you thinking I would call the crime in that situation?
The crime was the fact that I had these ideas in my head about raping my mother.
But I was specifically saying at the beginning and a couple times since that I don't think that that's a crime. If a thought just pops in your head...
It didn't just pop in my head. I actually entertained the ideas and my thought example, etc.
Oh yeah. So you're saying in this situation that the thought presented itself, and then you had a choice at that point whether or not to indulge in that thought, to quote unquote entertain yourself with that thought, or to refrain. And you're saying that you chose to. And yes.
And then in retrospect, I said, well, I enjoyed that a little too much. There's something wrong with this situation. I'm going to go see if, I need help. That's a good conclusion from that.
Well, that's fine. You can still have done something wrong to get to that good conclusion.
But nothing wrong happened. Nothing bad has affected the world or anybody. It hasn't even affected me in a bad way. In fact, it affected me in a good way. It gave me something to think about, something to change who I actually am.
But to say that nothing bad has happened is going to be question begging in this context. To me, that's like saying, I beat up this kid, and then I thought to myself, that's not, that didn't seem right. I'm going to go ask someone.
You still beat up the kid.
That's the action. That's what's wrong. You actually physically went out. He's just thought of these thoughts about his mum raping, killing his mum, whatever. And he's just thought about it. He's constantly thought about it every night, even possibly planning out how to do it. But then at one point, he changes and he goes, this is extremely wrong. I need to go get help. That's
yeah.
Well, that's what I'm talking. That's fine.
No crime was committed.
Well, that's question begging.
Explain the crime.
The crime, in my view, is that you've lusted.
Okay, I'm curious on what you think a crime is.
Meaning that you've done something morally wrong.
That's more deviant. Crime and deviance are two different things. Crime is a solid thing that's applicable by a law. It's being properly constructed.
Something tangible.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, what?
It has to be an action.
Sorry, what are
crime
you
is
saying?
Literally an action. It's not a thought.
Look, then let's define our terms because that seems if you're just defining a crime as something that's an action and not a thought, then trivially, thought crimes are incoherent. Then
Very good.
But
I wanted to explore where you guys were coming from. Maybe there could be a better word for what you call it. But essentially, it is exactly what the name implies. It's
let's
inconsistent.
just use immoral. I'm talking about immoral mental actions.
That'll be deviance. It'll be for deviance then.
You can call it what you want, but that's what I'm going for is morally wrong mental actions.
Okay, morally wrong mental actions. There's a problem with that. Mental actions, what is that?
Well, we've been giving some examples that you just discussed one about lusting after your mother.
But he seeks help, and the outcome was positive. He actually did the right thing. He realized he was that there was something wrong with him.
So are you saying that if something results in a good outcome, that the means to that result can't be wrong?
Means?
No, not outcome. Output would be a better word. If the output is good.
The action he took from that thought process was to get help. but that thought process, according to you, is morally wrong and therefore a crime.
So two things have happened. You've done an action, and then there's been a good result of that action, correct?
No action's been
No.
done. It's just held the thought of raping and killing his mother. That's all.
Well, I'm talking about mentally wrong or morally wrong mental actions. So, and you, Peter, yourself distinguished earlier between having a mere thought pop in your head and actually the action of lusting. So are you saying it's not an action now to lust?
Well,
You think
if
is
I
an
I
can-
action.
never stated it was.
Well, hang on. If I can say anything, when you talk about moral actions, the way I remember, every action has a reaction. So, what would be the reaction of your mental action if that was in fact the case? What would be the outcome of a mental action? What would happen?
I mean, I don't.
And if
I'm not
Okay.
saying that every action has a reaction, whatever that means.
Well,
but I mean,
in the real
it
world,
does.
it does. If you go after, if you murder somebody, people are going to hunt you down and throw you in the slammer and throw away the key. That is the reaction of your action. If Prag wanted to go out there, and I know I'm going against what gray matter wants here, and went out there and raped his mom, the action of that, or I mean the reaction of that, would be that he is an incredibly sick human being and was thrown in an insane asylum. Now, as far as what you're going on with your mental action, what would be the reaction to that action if there was any in the example that you're giving?
all right, guys. So just a heads up: in the philosophy of action, people regularly talk about the types of things that I just referred to, and they are called actions, even if they don't have any, explicit type of, reactions in the sense that you're talking about. So if you don't want to use that word in that way, though, you just need to give me another word. Obviously, there's going to be a difference. There's some type of difference between the thought of noticing, the thought popping in your head / noticing of an attractive woman, and then the choice to afterwards willfully engage in lusting after that woman. These are two different types of things. If you don't want to call that latter thing an action, that's fine. But then you just need to give me another term.
All right, well, let's try calling it what it actually is, a concept.
No,
It's more of a
definitely not
process.
concept.
It's processing an action. Now, you could say there's actions within that process, but rather than going into physics, let's go into actual, behavior. Within behavior, we don't care about what all the little neurons and atoms are doing. We care about, well, what did the person do, and what might have led him to do that. So if I have, and to respect gray matter, I'm going to change my example. If I decided to create a virus to destroy the world, then I've obviously made an immoral action. But if I thought about it and then later said, that's pretty dumb, I'm not going to do that, I wouldn't call that thought or any of those thoughts bad, because none of them produced any negative effects whatsoever.
Well, okay, so, two questions here. One, I'm not even sure if, just having the, the thought or thinking about, creating this virus is in and of itself wrong. I listed two examples of things that I do believe are wrong. One of them is sort of indulging in sort of hateful thoughts, in that rage sense. I think, indulging in maybe jealousy would be another example. I think, obviously the lust one I listed, but I don't, maybe we can posit that this virus maker hates the world, and he's creating this, virus. He's daydreaming about murdering everybody because, he hates everybody. Yeah, that would be, we could talk about that, and I would say that that's wrong, even if he, comes to his senses, so to speak, and decides not to do it. while he was engaging in his hateful thoughts, he was doing something wrong.
We would disagree.
Going back to your jealousy, because I know you mentioned that quickly, maybe this will offer a bit more of an
Sure.
understanding. If you're jealous about something, your friend, say, has a new car, which you really want. Now, you have this thought that, you're jealous, it's impulse, you want that as well. So you can go about things two ways. You can kill him, steal his keys, get the car, or you can go and work, you can get a loan or something and buy your own. Now, where is the crime in that?
I mean, well, there's
That's-
two ways. Well, so when you say that he was jealous, do you mean that he just noticed something that his friend happens to have, and he just had sort of like a kind of like he sort of noticed it in that relevant way? You can say someone is jealous in that sense, where he sort of has that flash of jealousy. But I'm talking about, in particular, a person who is presented with that, that quote unquote flash of jealousy, and then indulges in it. He's thinking to himself, "Oh, that's so unfair. That's not right. Woe is me."
What happens if you just indulge for it for several months before deciding to get that loan or go work and get that job, etc.? What happens then? Does he still commit the crime of jealousy?
Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's anything specifically in Scripture which talks about jealousy. But I mean, I think that's right. I think that does seem like something that, that type of envy, right, is definitely seems to me something that's morally wrong. Yeah.
All right. Redline, any thoughts?
Yeah, it's just that it's just very, very confusing to me, because in a way I still haven't heard how anything could really be considered an action in the thought sense. Because if we're thinking about it, it's purely abstract. Now, I want to bring up something William Lane Craig says, is that, an abstract object like a number can't cause anything. So therefore, in the causal sense, it's neither moral or immoral. It's such a moot point that's not even worth it. And you asked me to come up with a definition that would better describe this. And the definition I came up was this: an action in the public sense as opposed to a consequence is wrong if it has any noticeable chance of hurting someone in any malicious way. And of course, we're talking about the action of the observer here. And that was the definition that you requested previously that I wanted to throw out there. And I just want to ask your thoughts. Based on that definition, would you say that is a pretty good representation of when an action would become immoral?
Sorry, can you say it again?
Yes, I can. Just tell me when you're ready.
Go ahead.
All right. An action in the public sense, as opposed to a consequence, is wrong if it has any noticeable chance of hurting someone in any malicious way. Examples: a guy is in the process of doing open heart surgery. There is a chance that the patient could actually die as a result of this guy tearing his chest cavity open and working on his heart. But it would not be immoral because it wasn't in any malicious way. Now, example number 2. Let's say the guy who opens up the chest cavity doing open heart surgery purposely, and full knowing what he's doing, stops the guy's heart and doesn't revive him, killing him. There was a malicious intent, so therefore the action would then be immoral. And now we'll go third person. A guy's chopping down a tree. The tree's going to fall onto a house that can cause harm. The guy chopping the tree doesn't know that's going to go south from there. But you do, as an outside observer. Since you observed it, therefore the definition will define whether your next action, as a result of viewing that, what it is. So if you observed the guy chopping on a tree and you said, "Hey, stop," you could kill someone doing that. That would be a moral action on your part. But if you decided to not tell him, then that would be an immoral action on your part.
So what do you mean by an action in the public sense? What work is that little qualifier doing there?
What work is what qualifier?
in the public, like what happens if we take that out? Like what does it, how does it change the sentence?
Okay,
What it's doing?
the action in a public sense means the action in which we all define action. So the action being every action has a reaction. If it doesn't have a reaction, there is no action.
Okay, I mean, so I'm still not accepting that, but let's go with it for a second here.
Well then, well hang on. Let's open
That's
that
critical.
up for a sec. Yeah, let's open that up for a sec. Can you name me an action that does not have a reaction?
Yeah, I mean, it's conceivable that the universe and everything in existence just disappears 3 seconds from now, and then everything that happens doesn't have a reaction because there's no universe.
The action is the universe not existing anymore.
That's not a reaction to the things we're all doing.
Let's slow down for a second. Wait, what? Okay, I'm lost from both of you.
I'm trying to figure out what his example was entailing, Prag.
Oh, okay.
Because
Continue.
okay, so are you saying that in this example at least, did somebody make the universe not exist anymore?
No, I'm not necessarily saying that at all. No, I'm just saying, look, it just ceases to exist.
All right, it just ceases to exist. Okay, then. Well, then the reaction of it ceasing to exist is that it doesn't exist anymore.
Well, that's one very bold claim there, because I've never actually observed something completely ceasing to exist.
Yeah. Well, in this thought experiment, there would be a reaction to that. The reaction to the universe just popping out of existence is that it doesn't exist anymore. Then an action of throwing a ball through the air, the reaction of that was either it hits the batter's bat or it hits the ground shortly after. What goes up must come down kind of thing.
So the batter hits the ball, and then the universe ceases to exist. What's the reaction of the batter hitting the ball?
The ball goes flying.
Well, no, the universe ceases to exist, so the ball doesn't go flying.
Okay.
Well, the ball stopped existing. The batter stopped existing. A bunch of things stopped existing. This word stopped existing. My logic stopped existing.
Okay, so, all right, so the ball goes flying towards, and then the universe stops existing before. Well, then the action wasn't in this context, in this thought experiment that you're proposing, is that after the batter hits, as to assume that the action of the batter hitting the ball caused the universe to exist, or was that completely independent on what the batter did?
No, the universe ceases to exist independently of what the batter does.
Okay, so then the action being that the universe ceases to exist, the reaction would be the universe doesn't exist anymore.
But I'm not talking about the action here. Isn't the universe ceasing to exist? The action is the ball and the bat making contact.
Okay.
So the reaction, so that's an action, the ball and the bat making contact, okay? But there's no reaction because there's no time to, the universe ceases at that point. So there's no reaction involved.
You would just go back a step, because if the bat at least touched the ball, the reaction of the ball flying through the air and hitting the batter's bat is that it made it to its destination. It went from point A to point B. There was an action and there was a reaction. The reaction of the ball flying through the air, the reaction of that is that it hit the batter's bat, regardless if it went flying or not. You can just step it back a notch and see what the action was. But if we're talking about the universe disappearing independent, then the action that initially caused the universe to not exist is independent on what the batter did. So your example, trying to equate the two, seems to fall on its face.
Sorry, so let me kind of break out how
Well,
I'm
the big
understanding
issue
this.
here, hold on, before you go on, I'm going to ask you a question. Could you clarify what you believe the term cease existing means? Because I think we might be using a little
well, I actually
different.
think that the basic point is getting muddled a bit. I just want to say, what defines an action, because then we can apply that to the thought crime topic that we're at. I don't want to stray so far off topic that we're so past it that we can't pick back up. So
Fair enough.
So in terms of this, I want to say that with an action being that there was a reaction, can you just define anything? Because I've already shown you that the universe just ceasing to exist. There is a reaction. It doesn't exist anymore. So do you have any other examples that might show an action that doesn't have a reaction?
Well, I mean, so two things. One, if the universe ceases to exist, the reaction isn't that it ceases to exist. That's the same thing.
No,
But
it
again,
doesn't
I'm not.
exist anymore.
Or yeah, but that's the same thing. That's just saying the
The
same thing
moment,
in other words.
the moment
But
that the ball touches the bat, it has moved a fraction. Even if it was just a fraction, that 1 second of time that it's on the other side, it has, moved a fraction. If it has not yet hit the bat, the action has not taken place, and therefore there is no responding reaction.
no, I'm talking. So consider there's 1 second of duration that and the very end, the boundary of that second. At the boundary of that second is when the ball and the bat first make contact. There has been no bounce back yet at all.
Okay.
So
In this sense, the problem here is...
That's the second the energy has been transferred to the ball.
No,
That's
the
what,
biggest problem
the
here,
bat hasn't
guys, is the
touched
fact
it.
that his example asks or suggests that the universe stopped existing. And our laws of action-reaction are laws of the universe. So, obviously, if there's no more universe, that law no longer applies. That would be the biggest problem I'm seeing here. So, I don't like that analogy for the very sake that the analogy goes outside the very laws we are discussing right now. And the laws are what action and reaction are. If the universe stops existing, so do those laws. So let's find an example in the universe, or a thought experiment in the universe that doesn't just stop, meaning the universe itself stops. Okay?
Well, I don't even know why I have to do that, because that would mean that you're saying that, in this scenario, that these things at the end, of the universe's existing aren't actions, but they would still be.
I think the main issue is that the concept is just so confusing to a lot of people. It certainly took me back a step to say, hey, wait a minute, what? That in a real world, in the basic sense, every action has a reaction. If the ball never made it to the bat, then the batter never had the chance to do the action that would cause a reaction, i.e. the bat hitting the ball and the ball go flying. So that action never took place, so correspondingly there was no reaction. So you would just make it back a step. All right, the pitcher threw the ball went flying. So there's the action, the pitcher pitched the ball, and the ball went flying. Now let's go back even further. Okay then, so there was no time for the pitcher to actually pitch the ball. Okay, then the action never took place. The more this thought experiment goes on and keep backtracking even further, it still does not give an example of an action that does not have a reaction, even in the most extreme cases of your example.
All right, so I guess I'm not going to keep going on this. I guess we'll just have to disagree on this one. It sounds like you're saying all actions are causes. That's what it's boiling down to. So if you want to say, if you have, thoughts, you can have results. So you can have like the memory. So if you have lustful thoughts, that causes you to, in the future, have this, to have this memory where you had these thoughts in the past.
Fair enough.
There's an example of a cause for what it's worth.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Fair enough. Now, the problem here is, though, when you define something as wrong, why is it wrong? Like, what is this? Again, I go back to what I asked before. In your definition of morality, the way you seem to be viewing it, I don't see any actual meaning behind even having morality.
Well, I think maybe what you mean is maybe you're like a consequentialist and you want to say that something is only wrong if it produces some, bad consequence. And, maybe you want to analyze bad consequences in terms of, producing pain or something along those lines.
Or even
whatever bad consequence, but yeah.
I would say even
logical.
has a chance of having a bad consequence, even has a chance. If you were to, because a mere number doesn't have a chance to do anything because it's abstract, just like a thought. It's abstract. It doesn't have a chance. Only when the action becomes tangible does that we can equate whether it's wrong or right, so on and so forth.
Okay, so yeah, where we were talking earlier, we were going Redline with your sort of idea of maybe what wrong could be. And so the idea is you can make an argument. Is one, an action in the public sense as opposed to a consequence is wrong if it has a noticeable chance of hurting someone, and then you say that, lusting after, so-and-so doesn't have this noticeable chance of hurting someone, therefore the action isn't wrong. And you're right in suspecting that I'm going to say, well, wait a second, I don't agree with this analysis of what a wrong action is. So first off, I'm going to have to ask, justification for it. But even more directly, even more immediately, I'm going to see if I have any objections to it, like any, rebutting defeaters. And to do that, I need to first understand what it is. So I'm trying to figure out what you mean by an action in the public sense. I mean, what's an action in the private sense?
Well, we know what action is. Well, an action in the public sense would be completely subjective. How you interpret an action. How we interpret an action is any action has an equal and opposite reaction. Or that would be physics, but every action has a reaction. That's the way we defined it. Now, you are free to disagree with it, and I'm sure you do, but that's what we mean in it. So what's the next question in terms of the thing I gave?
Okay, so here's my question. Is my lusting after a woman um, an action in the public sense?
Well, of course not.
No.
Okay, if it's not, then this analysis that you've given, even if I grant it, which I don't, by the way, but even if I grant it, that's still compatible with lusting being wrong, because you've only talked about public actions. You haven't said anything about private ones.
We're not talking about morality. We're talking about actions.
We're talking about wrong actions.
No, right now the topic was going over the topic of what is an action. Now, if you're asking about morals,
that's a whole
separate
show in itself.
Yeah, we're talking about physical, non-mental, because we don't believe in thought crime. We don't see a thought being criminal. We do see a thought being neurotic or have a tendency to cause immoral actions, but the thoughts themselves we do not believe to be immoral.
I thought the whole question of this show was whether these morally wrong mental, I've called them actions, but you can call them whatever you want, these morally wrong mental behaviors, whether the morally wrong mental behaviors whether there are morally wrong mental behaviors. And so we are talking about morality here. It's fundamentally about morality, isn't it?
Yes, but we're also very confused on what this morality is for you. You actually not really defined it. You just said that morality is whatever. Well, I'm not even. You didn't really say this. I more made the assumption. So I'm going to have you state it. What is morality? How do you define it?
I mean, I think I have this. Most people, I think, have the same notion, the same meaning of morally wrong. But at least before they enter into philosophy, I think a lot of times folks just have in mind, the type of thing that is, properly going to prick their conscience. Something,
let us decide if your definition of morality and our definition of morality are the same. Can you give us the definition?
No, I think. I mean, when you say like morality, you mean like something. Like a morally wrong, something that's morally wrong, an action that's morally wrong, and you're trying to say, what is this property of wrongness? Is what you're asking about.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you mean by wrong, and what do you mean by right? And in terms of semantics, in terms of meaning, I don't have, I'm open to, plenty of meaning definitions there, but broadly. I think when people think of wrongness, they're thinking of this property of actions, which it properly produces guilt in the actor.
Well, out this, I guess the big question would be, what is your foundation for your morality? Is that thing? Is your morality what you find moral or immoral, is that just based on the teachings in the Bible, or is that based on some other thing? Like for me, a idea of an immoral thing would be hurting somebody. And a moral thing would be promoting somebody's well-being. What is your like backing for, or what is your foundation for a morally good thing and a morally bad thing?
Okay, so you actually had two things there. What's the foundation is the first one you asked, and then you asked, basically how do we know what is right and wrong? So notice that there are three things floating here. One, you have the semantic issue. What does wrong mean? Then you've got the grounding issue. What is wrongness, constitutionally? What is it? And then you've got this third issue is how do you determine, the epistemological question, how do you determine what is wrong?
Actually,
so
those are all the exact same question.
No, they're not. No,
Well,
absolutely not.
All right, fine. Well, we'll chop it up any way you want. When we say morality, let's just say morality in the strict sense.
I was going to answer, so I'll answer all three. In terms, I already mentioned the meaning. The first one, the semantics of wrongness, of what we mean by wrongness. Then in terms of what I think wrongness is constitutionally, I think I'm a divine command theorist, so I think that if God commands something, commands us not to do something that it's wrong. And in terms of epistemology, how do we determine what's right and wrong? I think we determine those things, largely by our conscience. Though yes, I do. I'm not an inerrantist, but I do think, for instance, that we can get to like Jesus's teachings in the way that I described, the historical Jesus's teachings, and I can have good reasons for thinking that Jesus, knew well what was actually right and what was actually wrong.
So what would happen if your God just suddenly claims that killing babies was the right action?
Or not just killing babies, but anything that you and I know is wrong, right? I mean, rape or whatever. And I'm going to say for any action that is wrong, that's not an action that God will command. There is no possible
world. How can we say that?
That's just the meaning. When I talk about God, my understanding of God is of a quote-unquote...
It seems like your definition of God is internalized with your own values. They are one and the same. Practically, you have become your own version of God. That's why he seems to agree with you on so much.
Well, hold on. Before we interrupt him, I want to finish that, and then I have one question that I might not ask if he answers it.
Yeah, no, so let's say I discover tomorrow, I think that, homosexual behavior is wrong. But let's say that I become convinced tomorrow that it's A-okay, there's nothing morally wrong with it. All that will mean is that, oops, I've been wrong the whole time. The whole time it hasn't been wrong, to engage in homosexual behavior. And let's say that it's actually wrong to, prevent to command people not to engage in homosexual behavior. Then I would say, look, God, it's impossible for God to have commanded people not to engage in homosexual behavior because that's not the kind of thing that a good being would do.
So what you're saying is your beliefs are unfalsifiable?
No, because I was going to ask this question. If the Bible stated something that you find is morally wrong, then would that show that that particular part in the Bible, even though it states that God commanded it, is wrong?
Yes.
All right. So all we need to do is find you a particular verse in the Bible that will test to see if you find that is wrong or not.
Well, I don't know why, because if you did, I would just say, okay, well, that part of the Bible's wrong.
Ah, okay. Well, that's interesting to know. Fair enough.
Do you believe the scriptures were divinely inspired in any way?
Oh, man, you asked that perfectly because you said in any way. But, there's so many ways to try to interpret inspiration. So,
an all-powerful God should have the ability to convey a simple message and to ensure that this message is not in any way damaged or faltered.
Okay, so I agree that God has the ability. Should I continue what I was saying?
Are you saying he doesn't wish to?
So now I'm confused. What am I supposed to be responding to?
Can you repeat your question?
Well, it seems to me, because you just said, well, he can, but does that mean then that he doesn't want to convey his message?
No, you just asked if he can. So the answer was yes, he can.
All
So
right.
yes, then my response to that was, does he want to convey his message?
Can I go on one thing here real quick? Is that, what about the parts in the Bible that appear to be from God Himself, not through any mere, oh, this is what I think God said. No, this is literally what God has said. Because I think Atheism TV in the chat said, go to Luke chapter 19. I think it was verse 27. It said, but those mine enemies which would not that I should reign over them, bring hither and slay them before me. So would you say that that was an immoral thing, or an immoral?
I don't even know what's going on there. I didn't even understand that verse.
Yeah, that was out of context. I'm interested in.
All right. Well, apparently the
I'll look it up.
the context being is that the people who didn't want God to rule over them were to be slayed in front of Him. So in a sense, saying like, hey, I really don't feel like I should have to be ruled over over a what Christopher Hitchens would call a celestial dictatorship, and because you are denying God the privilege to rule over you, you then deserve death.
I mean, it sounded like you said that was from Luke. I don't know any verse like that off the top of my head in Luke. That's probably my fault.
Well, I'll give you it. Then it
But
was.
here, but look, it doesn't matter. All I'm going to say is any of these types of verses you give me, unless I like have really good reason to think that, like, if this is Jesus saying this particular thing, for instance, then I'm going to say, okay, well, do we have good historical reasons to think that Jesus said that? If you go to, for instance, some Old Testament, logging of God saying some action that I think is like morally wrong, I'm just going to say, okay, God didn't say that, because I'm
So
like I said,
subjective
I'm
cherry
not an
picking.
inerrantist.
Yeah, wouldn't that be subjective cherry picking?
No, it would just be.
You're picking passages that only agree to your worldview. As cognitive dissonance, you're trying to merge your worldview with something that's already written down and rigid.
Well, that can't be right, because I just said a moment ago that I would have to determine what the historical Jesus said, whether or not I liked it.
This brings
Well,
us a very
where are you going
interesting.
to get this from?
And Prague, go ahead.
Before we go off, it does bring up an interesting thing. Once again, you stated that if you believe it's morally wrong, then it's obviously not what God said. Correct.
Right.
Just a quick clarification. Which brings me to say, how do you know when something is morally wrong?
That's the epistemological question, and I answered it this way. I said, well, for the most part, we consult our consciences, but I also I do look to the texts, and the way I described is I go to it historically to figure out, hey, did Jesus actually say this, or did God actually do I have good reasons to think that this book is the recording of a man who genuinely believed that God spoke to him, or is it something that stands a good chance of some overzealous Jew just trying to represent God in his own way when nothing actually occurred there. That all plays into my sort of looking at the evidence.
Before we go on that, with the consciousness, once again, that's not explaining how you know something is wrong, because in order for consciousness to work, it needs to be able to have some sort of standards in which it can measure what side is wrong and what side is right. And I'm curious what those standards are.
No, I don't think you need standards. I think humans naturally have a conscience, and that conscience is activated in particular situations. I think humans know that lying is wrong. That's something that our conscience testifies to.
The moment we find one person who disagrees on what is right and wrong, that falls apart. If you look at the mind of, say, someone with a psychopathological disorder who has ventricles wider than any other person's, and they don't actually see murder as wrong, what happens if it's someone with autism who doesn't see social actions that we'd see as deviant or wrong? What happens if they don't actually know it's wrong? How can they then discern what is wrong and then what is right?
See, that's wonderful, because they're both missing empathy, which, I mean, neurology has a few guesses upon that matter, and we don't need to go into that, but it is generally understood that unless you can empathize with the other person, morality is not really going to be able to be established in you. So, like he mentioned, autism and psychopathic mentalities do not have empathetic tendencies. They just can't relate with the other person, which kind of, since you want to go into teachings of Jesus, he used the old, I forget if it was the Greeks who first came up with it, but the golden rule that, as most people know it, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, which is essentially empathy. So if I see that I could be causing someone suffering, I may be able to empathize with that and say, well, I wouldn't want to suffer like that. So you know what? That's wrong. That could be a very basic moral or basic way to determine what is morally right and morally wrong. So that shows some sort of standard. You have yet to actually establish what your standards are. You just simply said that you don't need to have standards. So
the question was, how do we come to know what is right and wrong? You asked the epistemological question, and I'm telling you, I come to know it two ways. The one way is through conscience, and that's the way we started talking about. So that's how I can come to know what, the one of the ways that I can come to know what is right and wrong. So I've answered the question, how do we come to know what is right and wrong? All this other stuff.
It's a vague answer, though. You need to emphasize on one thing. What is your conscience doing? Because I could say that, yeah, I produced this object in a factory. It doesn't tell anybody anything other than it came from a factory. They still want to know how I produced the object. What did the factory do? That's all I'm asking you to answer that. What is your consciousness actually doing to determine whether something is right or wrong?
Well, via my conscience, I have the power to intuitively recognize right from wrong.
Just like a factory has the power to produce things. But that doesn't still answer the question. What is the factory actually doing to produce the object? What is your conscience actually doing? What standards or whatever is it using to determine that this action is right or wrong?
Wait, so you're asking for like a mechanism? What's
yes.
like a... Okay.
Be specific.
I mean, when you ask for a mechanism, that's usually like in terms of like physical explanation. So you want to understand why, one reaction behaves a particular way, and you can explain that in terms of mechanism. At least until you get to the fundamental laws of physics, and then
we get that. But let's stay on topic with morality.
Well,
what is it?
Well, what I'm saying is that this isn't a physical thing. I don't think there's some type of. It's just a power that you have via your conscience. It's a cognitive faculty. There doesn't need to be any type of mechanistic one gear moving another gear that results in this final phase. It's
so
just
why?
I can directly intuit. I can directly intuitively know that lying is wrong.
So why
then does your God make it so that certain people lack this cognitive ability? Certain people lack this understanding. Certain people can't even grasp the basic concepts of right and wrong. Why is it that some people are born with defects that make them like so?
Well, that doesn't seem on topic right now. I mean, I can answer that if you want, but it doesn't seem like it's relevant.
It's very relevant.
Everyone have a fair chance to know what's right and wrong.
No, I mean, so the question is, why doesn't God give everybody perfect awareness of right and wrong? Why are there autistic
rudimentary people? You mean autistic person doesn't understand that going up, grabbing someone tight and squeezing them really hard isn't acceptable. They don't know the very basics, some of them.
Yeah, all I can offer are speculations. So there are, this has to do with the problem of evil. There are types of theodicies that I would pull in and say, well, maybe this kind of helps explain why God would permit that here, and here's another thing that would be into consideration for another reason why God might allow that to happen.
So they're just a sacrifice for us.
All right. Well, how about this? There's a question in the chat. So I guess I'll ask you. It's very basic. Why is it wrong to steal? Just answer that question.
What was it?
Why is it wrong to steal?
He's asking for an ontological explanation. I think it's wrong to steal because we're commanded not to steal.
commanded. Okay,
I think
Prag.
it's subjective. If it's a person stealing a loaf of bread because their family's starving, I'm not going to lean into them so hard compared to a rich guy who's stealing, say, a gold watch for absolutely no reason.
Yeah, so I'm just going to put in a ceteris paribus clause in there and say, yeah, so look, there are these situations where you can arguably say stealing's okay, but I'm trying to answer his question,
I thought the commandment was solid that stealing was completely wrong.
Yeah, in stealing, just stealing in a solid sense. Or
So-
does there have to be a context within the stealing to determine whether it's right or wrong?
Either one. So, I mean, whichever is the case. Suppose it's absolutely wrong to steal in all contexts, regardless. In that case, the reason it's wrong, he asked, why is it wrong? The reason is because God commanded in all contexts not to steal. However, if it's only wrong in particular contexts, then why is it wrong in those particular contexts and not in others? Well, because God commanded that it's us not to steal in those particular contexts. So that just depends on whichever one is actually the case.
But he didn't state that. He did not state, thou shan't steal unless totally necessary. He just stated, thou shan't steal. And I can come back and back this up with Matthews 5:17 through 20, which, Jesus talks about how he has not come to abolish the law of the old prophets, and that, you will not change a single letter of the old law. You will follow it to the dot, or else you will lose your place in heaven.
So, two things. So, one, even frankly, non-Christian exegetes are, might accuse. So let's say for a second that it's actually only wrong to steal in particular situations, and it's not wrong in other situations. It's okay in other situations. Well, there's all sorts of instances in the Bible where, look, clearly the author didn't mean, X, Y, Z. You're this kind of wooden reading that you're giving it is something that no author and no reader would have understood it as. And even non-Christian scholars will say that in particular situations. Whether that's the case in this lying situation is up for or not lying. Whether it's the case that you're reading it too woodenly in the case of do not steal is, that's going to be up for debate. I haven't really researched that enough.
Well,
For me, it could go either way.
To come back to the fact of it being divinely inspired, could God not convey a simple message? I can do it. Thou shalt not steal unless completely necessary.
It seems to be, quite literally, the Ten Commandments were written in stone. Thou shalt not steal, period. Nothing. It says there's no context within that says within the Ten Commandments that say unless it's completely necessary or unless your life depends on it, which I guess would be the same thing. But, it just says thou shalt not steal. So even if you steal, to save your life or to feed your family, if you don't have enough money to feed your family, you're stealing for them. You're not stealing to get even more rich than you already are. It would still be considered wrong in that sense, would it not? Or is there something I'm missing?
Yeah, so I still have, so the two things that I said, I mentioned the first one. The first one is that it's not clear to me at all that you're properly, even non-Christian scholars would think that you're properly, or that many might think, look, you're being ridiculously uncharitable. That's not what the author meant. That's possibility number one. And response number two is that if it's the case that that what the author definitely meant was that you can't steal in any context whatsoever, then like I've already told you guys, I'm just going to say, okay, well, then that's wrong. And you got it wrong.
It seems to me that if it was the second, that would ultimately make God immoral because some people actually have to steal in order to survive. Some people have to steal in order to get rid of some human suffering. And so in that case, with the real tangible world that we live in, sometimes stealing is absolutely necessary.
Well, I just said that the author got it wrong. So the author says, look, God commands us not to steal in any context whatsoever. And if it turns out that it's actually, okay to steal in some particular contexts, well, given what the author meant, the author is wrong. The author is not accurately representing God.
Isn't God the author?
That goes thou shalt murder, etc., because that's the same author.
You're talking to me like I'm a biblical inerrantist or something, but I keep saying I'm not a biblical inerrantist. I'm not, that doesn't really matter to me. I treat the Bible as a secular document that I can but I believe that you can use that document to learn all sorts of interesting things. I think there's a lot of good history in it, and I think, I do think that, the Old Testament letters or documents, were written by people who were in the atmosphere where God was acting, and
There's
so,
a there's a
I'm
lot of there's a lot of good history in Forrest Gump as well. However, I don't then go and live my life by the teachings in Forrest Gump.
okay. So I don't think you understand what I'm saying, Thurston. So maybe you can tell me what I'm trying to say, and then I'll correct you when you're done.
I'm just taking what you're saying and analysing it, really.
Well, why did you say that? How is that relevant? Or what do what's my point, and how are you refuting my point?
Because you stated that the Bible, you see it as a secular thing, you can look at it, you can learn a lot of interesting facts about history from it, you can gain moral guidance from it. I can do the same from Forrest Gump, etc. Does that mean that I should live...
Well, so what? What's the point of you saying that?
Well, should I live by Forrest Gump?
So when you say live by Forrest Gump, do you mean why should I treat Forrest Gump as an errant?
Why shouldn't I create a church of Forrest Gump? Why shouldn't I attend its meetings? Why shouldn't I create monuments to Forrest Gump, etc.?
So you're still talking to me like I'm an errantist. That's what you're doing. When you say live by the book, I don't. The book provides evidence for a particular proposition. So
the only evidence you seem to accept is the one that agrees with your worldview in the first place. You've already stated that by stating that, you'll only accept stuff that you agree with. Other stuff you'll say the author got wrong.
But I've also explained to you that if you could show me that that Jesus said that, suppose we came across a new historical discovery where the text said, and we have some good reason to think that Jesus said, look, homosexuality is A-okay. So homosexual acts I'm talking about. Then I'd say, oops, I was wrong. So you're mistaken there.
And what happens if there was archaeological evidence that showed that it was totally wrong and should kill all gays?
If I've got, if I've got really good reasons from conscience to think that it's wrong to kill all gays.
No, it's actually right to kill all gays. God wants you to kill all gays.
But
There's actual physical evidence that God wants you to kill all gays. How would you receive that?
Right, that wouldn't be a good enough evidence to overcome all of my evidence that I have.
When it suits your view, it's good enough evidence.
No,
but when it doesn't suit your view, it's not.
Hold on. Each one of you, one at a time, I want to hear your full statement. So, Gnarly, can you continue? I want to hear everything you're saying and make your first point, okay?
Right, so let's imagine for a moment here that I treat the Bible as a secular document. Nevertheless, it has some historical value. So, for instance, you can learn things about, the first century Judaism and the first century Palestine in general by looking at these letters, which are historical documents but not inspired or anything of the sort. And I can learn what, some things that Jesus said. And suppose, furthermore, that I had these reasons to think that that God resurrected Jesus from the dead, and that Jesus was, in this sense, connected to God, and as a result, that the things that Jesus has said were wrong, his saying that they're wrong would be evidence for me that those things are wrong, but not not necessarily proof, but it would be some good evidence. But alternatively, I've got another way of knowing knowing if something is wrong. I've also got my conscience to consult. So now I've got these two avenues of evidence, and now I come into a situation where my conscience tells me one thing, and Jesus, tells me, allegedly, as far as the historical evidence shows, says another. In that case, I've got two competing evidences, and I've just got to look at which one is stronger. Am I more convinced that Jesus, is God-inspired and that he said that? Or am I more convinced that my conscience is right here? And that's just going to have to, those are two balances. And sometimes my conscience is amazingly clear. So my conscience very clearly and strongly tells me that it's wrong to just, murder all homosexuals everywhere. And especially if a text, if some old, Old Testament text, let's say there's some verse that I just never noticed that says that. I would be I'm not clear at all. You'd have to do a lot of work to convince me that that this is, a historically rooted text, that this was actually came about because of God's command. And you'd have to do that even before I considered my conscience. It's just very weak evidence against the morality of homosexuality, or the immorality of it. Or sorry, the immorality of murdering all homosexuals. It's just weighing good evidence against bad evidence, and doing the good work of someone who's doing their best to find the truth.
Okay, so what if you were out walking one Sunday and suddenly the sky opened, Jesus descended from the heavens and told you directly that you should kill every homosexual you know?
I'd have to go through the experience myself, because there's the possibility of a hallucination. But I mean,
Can you answer the question?
I would have to go through it myself. I mean, if I were absolutely convinced that this was Jesus in front of me telling me to do these things, then I would do it. But I don't think that's possible.
Again, you're bringing up my previous point. You're not establishing how you evaluate things. You can't just say your consciousness and not explain how your consciousness is evaluating. If Jesus were in front of you, how would you evaluate whether that or not that is Jesus?
I don't know, man. I don't know how to answer that.
See, in which case, the dangers in here come from the idea of, because you don't really know how to evaluate whether it's actually Jesus or not, there's a chance you might consider it is Jesus and consider that message to be the message of God and consider killing a bunch of people.
Oh, yeah, sure.
You don't see a problem here.
Well, no. Because I don't think it's possible. I mean, it sounds to me, I don't think that in any world God/Jesus commands something, that is evil. He doesn't command us to do something that's evil.
Yeah,
Do you
but
know
that doesn't stop the thought experiment from taking place. In the same context, I see it as impossible that we could be playing baseball one day and everything just stop existing. But we still continue on with the thought experiment. So continuing on with the thought experiment, what would you do in that situation?
Well, there's a difference between counterfactuals and counterpossibles. So a situation where you're playing baseball and the universe and everything just ceases to exist is conceivable. There's no logical inconsistency in that, of that occurring.
Other than the ending of logic, but continue.
I don't know what you mean. But on my view, it's logically impossible for God to command, me to rape someone.
Do you claim to know the mind of God?
No.
Then how can it
Do you
be?
claim to know him personally?
Yeah.
And this personal relationship, does this relationship have you gathered an understanding of God from it?
That's too broad of a question.
It's meant to be.
So I don't know how to
It's
answer.
meant to be an easy yes or easy no.
Oh, I don't know enough about what you mean there.
Okay. If I have a relationship with someone, I at least know their name and I know what they like or dislike, in a very maybe broad sense, but I can tell you some things about them and tell you how we work together, etc. I mean, have you gathered any of those examples from God in your personal relationship?
Well, I mean, if you want, the question is not just what I know, but what do I know from, experience, so from religious experience or whatnot. And no, I mean, there's nothing. I mean, all of the quote unquote facts about God that I believe are more from philosophical investigation more than anything.
Okay, so again, with the personal relationship, you're saying that outside of that relationship, you really have gained nothing from it. I mean,
Outside of, you mean
with your
inside
God,
of the
with God.
You mean from the relationship? Have I learned anything about God that I didn't know, from
Beforehand.
other sources?
Mm-hmm.
And no, I mean everything that I could think of listing are things that I've, that I know from other sources. God's goodness, God is loving.
It sounds to me like it's not really a personal relationship then. What it is then is you have an understanding that you've collected throughout texts and from other people's insight, etc., that you happen to have agreed with and have established for that some sort of idea of what God is. That's not a relationship, however, in the sense of what I'm talking about, where when they talk personal relationship, one-on-one, that implies that God actually, as a mind, has influenced your mind directly in some way. And if not, well, there's no relationship there in that manner.
Okay, well then, so I can say, for example, that God has convicted me of, this sin or that sin, and these are things that so I'll pray to God about things, and then I might be convicted of some sin, and so there can be back and forth in that sense.
Are you saying by conviction, God has literally told you did something wrong?
No.
So what do you mean by that?
No, I mean, going back to conscience, I think in addition to our conscience, we have, Christians believe that the Holy Spirit resides in us. And so we have the Spirit, and that the Spirit can convict us of our sins.
Okay, I'm still not getting how this right now is affecting you.
I can be made aware of sins that I would have otherwise not been aware of.
Oh, okay. So what you're actually saying is this has made you aware of your sinful actions.
Right, or some set of, particular sinful actions.
Now, have you ever considered the idea that maybe you're self-evaluating?
Sure.
Okay. And what are your thoughts on that?
I conclude not.
Not?
This
Okay.
might be a little, I don't know, is this on topic, or what are we doing?
No, I figured the other topic right now is kind of gone at an impasse, and we can probably get back to it, but there's a few things I need to know about you. We've been making too many assumptions about you, and I don't think that's fair. So.
Cool. Okay.
So anyway.
Sorry, what was the question?
Okay. Upon self-reflection, the idea that could you have been just, self-reflecting, you said you disagree, and I'm going to ask, how did you come to that conclusion?
Well, so I've got, again, these reasons for thinking that that God resurrected Jesus from the dead, and that and that Paul is connected with Jesus along with the apostles, and so I take Paul's word seriously. So if you can give me good historical reasons to think that Paul, wrote X, Y, Z, then I've got, in turn, good reasons to think, that, this, this spiritual truth about my relationship with God and the Holy Spirit is also true. And so Paul testifies to the Holy Spirit convicting people of their sins. So that seems to be something that must be occurring in me as well. So I don't know if I can subjectively tell a difference between, for instance, when just my pure conscience is working, or when the Holy Spirit is doing something, is activating my conscience, so to speak, in those contexts. But I believe it happens on those grounds, on grounds of Paul's testimony.
Now, how have you evaluated that Paul is a trustworthy source?
So again, I've got these reasons to believe that God resurrected Jesus from the dead, and I've got these reasons to believe that Paul received an appearance from Jesus and converted as a result of it, and was accepted by the apostles, the leaders of the Jerusalem church, and that they commissioned him as to go, that Jesus commissioned Paul to go out and be an apostle.
All right, and what are these reasons?
For the resurrection, or for Paul?
For everything you just said. You said you had
Well,
reasons. I'm just asking what those reasons are.
It's a really, so I mean, that would start with the case for Jesus' resurrection, right?
I guess, yeah.
Whoa, that's a whole topic on its own.
Yeah, I guess you're right. Okay, well, we'll just assume you have these reasons. All right, so.
One quick thing there, can I just insert?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure, go ahead.
Just before I'm going. So you agree with Paul, right? You view him as a credible source.
Yeah.
What about the fact that Paul tells slaves to obey their slave owners?
I don't have a problem with that.
Would that entail
Okay,
that you
well,
don't have a problem with slavery?
Fair enough.
I'm going off, guys, because I've got to get some rest, so I'll leave you with that little one.
Hey, before you leave,
Okay.
I wanted to thank you, by the way, for
Yes,
going
of
on the
course.
show.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks
And
very
once
much.
again, can you tell people about your channel, etc., how to contact you, etc.?
Yes, it's Essence of Thought. You can find me on YouTube, contact me, message me, send me video, etc. I'll also let Jarl tell you about the Atheist Hub in the description. He can do that for me, if you'd be so kind, cheeky. So yes, thank you all for listening. This is Essence of Thought. Out.
Hey, Paul. Hey, Peter. Good to
Take
to
care.
meet you, man.
All right, perfect. So I guess going like trying to get back on topic here, with the concept of thought, or thought being a crime, or thought being immoral in that kind of sense, based on everything, the teachings of, whether it's the Bible or just the teachings of Jesus from an external source other than the Bible, where does he say, the mere thought would be a crime? I just want to, get that part, and then we'll move on from there.
So I know, like in Matthew, somewhere, I won't say like Matthew. I mean, so in one of, early on Matthew 5 or some such, you have Jesus talking about how, lusting is equivalent to committing adultery.
Mm-hmm.
If you've committed adultery in your heart, if you've lusted after a woman. So,
Right.
and he lists some things there, and that's kind of the grounding of in terms of a scriptural reason.
Okay, so in that very fact that you've committed adultery with her, I think it was something like you committed adultery in your heart, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to see, is it wrong simply because he says so, if nothing else, or is there another reason why it would be wrong other than him saying so?
So, okay, so remember I made these three different distinguishments. So if you're asking how do I know that it's wrong, that's answered one way. But it sounds like you're asking me right now, in virtue of what is it wrong? What is the grounding for its wrongness?
No, just
Fair enough.
just a simple yes or no answer to this one. Is there another reason why it's wrong other than the fact he said so?
When you say a reason for something, there's two ways. Either you could be asking for, like a reason to believe it's wrong, or
A motivation.
Alternatively, by reason, you could be asking for something that explains its wrongness, something that grounds its wrongness. And these are two different types of things.
When I talk reason, I'm thinking more like what motivates me to do or believe something. And a reason for me to, take science as credible would be its accomplishments.
Great.
So what's your reason?
So I didn't. Okay, so is that what you're asking, Redline? Are you asking for that's an epistemological question. Are you asking for why I should believe Jesus's words?
No, I'm saying in the concept of just a thought being a crime, or a thought being evil, immoral, whatever label we could put on it, would you arrive to the conclusion that a thought could be immoral by simply the fact that he said it, or is there another reason that it could be considered wrong, immoral, evil, what have you?
Yeah, you mean another justification for the belief that it's wrong. Yeah, it could be conscience.
Okay, and what's your conscience telling you? Why is it telling you that it is wrong?
Well, I would think I'm actually not sure if my conscience would tell me that lusting independently of that lusting is itself a sin. So I don't know if that particular one I would get on my own from my conscience. But let's go ahead and talk about, because I do have sort of that seeming now, but I don't know if that was from if that's something that that's either from the Holy Spirit or that's from
because when
my worldview.
When you say consciousness, it really doesn't say anything, because the consciousness. Strife said it actually in the chat.
Not consciousness, conscience.
Conscience. Sorry, I misspoke there. Conscience for an insane person, it tells them it's just fine to kill somebody. So when you say conscience, it really doesn't answer the question.
Well, the conscience would just be evidence for something's wrongness. It's not what makes it wrong.
Okay, then Then I'll ask it again. What else would say that the mere thought would be wrong or immoral, and what have you?
If you're asking for evidence, then it's the same too as before. In addition to this text saying it's wrong, the only other avenue would be, or at least that I'm aware of, I mean, you could have other people testify, that their conscience tells them that committing adultery in your heart is wrong, and then I could take it on that testimony that that it's wrong as a result of that. But for the most part, no. It's mostly just this text here that would lead me to believe that it's wrong.
Okay, then I'll ask you this: do you see why that wouldn't be appealing to a passerby on the street if you came up to me, if we never spoke, if you came up to me and say, hey, this thought or a thought is wrong, and I say, well, why? And you say, because this person said so. I would almost immediately say, well, that's an appeal to an authority, which is a fallacy.
Well, I would more ask, why you have such confidence in this guy?
Well, that too, but whether or not it's that, I would say it's an appeal to an authority, and he would have to justify why his authority or his authoritative figure would actually be, correct, which is what you would say, Prag. So, what I said would branch out from there, but what would you say to my reply? That's just an appeal to authority.
So are you going straight to like God's commands? Because I think that something is wrong.
I'm going into your reasoning for thinking that. Like, if we were to have a conversation, if you were to tell me your reasoning, and you said, my reasoning for thinking this is because it's written in this text by this one guy, I could easily come back and say, well, that's just an appeal to an authority, which in fact is a fallacy.
Okay, so I'm going to assume you mean the first option. I was going to ask for clarification. I'm just going to assume you mean the first one, which is, why should we trust in Jesus' testimony that something is wrong? Isn't that an appeal to authority? That's what you mean, right?
Okay, yeah, I assume we know what appeal to authority is, yeah.
Okay, well then I'm going to say that Jesus is a reliable source of knowledge.
Okay, in what sense? Based on what?
Meaning, if Jesus testifies to something's being morally wrong, then that's a good reason to believe that it's morally wrong.
Whether it's the God or Jesus, it would still be an appeal to an authority. If we just say it's wrong just because I say so, it's an appeal to authority, whether it's God or not. The fallacy is still there.
So, just to clarify, are you saying that if an authority testifies to you something, testifies to some particular fact, and you've got no reason to believe that he's wrong, that
that's
testimony...
fair. That's fair. If you have no other reason to doubt them, then their credentials alone would show that, hey, it's at least valid or at least rational to not assume they're lying.
Right.
But that doesn't stop the inquiry. It doesn't stop you from investigating it yourself. Sure. And actually verifying whether or not what they say is relevant. If you verify it is false, their credentials bear no weight against that. And hence what they said is false, regardless of their credentials. Right. That's why the appeal to authority is a fallacy.
It's an informal fallacy because an expert's saying that it is true doesn't prove that it's true. Experts have been wrong, and normally when you're in a discussion with someone, you're wanting to know that you're wanting to get at the reasons for why the authority, how the authority knows that XYZ is the case. That's normally why it's an informal fallacy.
Well, basically, I don't want to go on because it's really starting to get to the core of why this concept is in fact evil or whatnot within the last 15 minutes. Go figure. So I don't want to spend it discussing why it's a fallacy. I think we know what appeal to authority is. I'm just going to assume we all do, if that's a fair assumption to make. And so if I responded to you and saying, well, that's just an appeal to authority, let's pretend we're having this conversation. What would your reply to that be?
I don't think anything is wrong at all with believing something on the grounds of testimony from an authority. That's evidence as far as I'm concerned.
If you continue to investigate it. If you stop purely on that and declare it truth, purely by their credentials, then yeah, I would consider that wrong.
No,
I
that's not
consider
true.
that ignorance
Well,
to be dangerous.
pragmatic. Virtually all of your beliefs about history and science are on, are believed on the grounds of testimony that, from someone that you've heard in school or some book or some such. And you haven't, you've only investigated and you only plan on investigating the smallest fraction of those. But you're still
history
rational
does
for
not.
believing.
History does not make claims of like particular events and stuff in the past as being absolutely fact. They consider them to be verified as accurate or the most valid theory.
No,
that
when you
we
read
have.
when you read about the Civil War and it makes claims about generals and people that existed and wars that have occurred and treaties that were signed and all these types of things, they don't present them as, oh, maybe. I mean, they present them as truth.
Well, yeah, because we have no other better truth.
There's no reason to doubt it, because if you want to go into the nitty-gritty of things, where did they get these these stories of the Civil War from? They get from actual documents of the case. They get from pictures, from descriptions. They have guns and weaponry that were actually in the battle itself. Physical documents.
But Pragmatic hasn't seen any of that yet. So,
I have not.
So he believes it. He believes that all that stuff is there, and I do too.
That's fine.
Because I trust in their authority. I give them benefit of the doubt.
No, it's because there's no better explanation.
Better explanation for their testimony,
for
their
whether
writing.
or not this is actually trustworthy. If I see this writing and the best explanation I can think of is that it is valid, then yeah, it's valid to me.
Okay,
as soon as someone says, no, actually I saw, and here's physical footage of a person writing this document right now and forging it, well, now it's no longer a valid document to me. And if we find out that the Civil War never happened and all this other conspiracy stuff, obviously that's going to take a lot of new confounding evidence to do. Hence, that's why many people believed that that's not going to happen. But if it were to, people would change their minds and suddenly say, you know what, it didn't happen. And that's how truth in a practical sense works, through verification. Everything is always under the scope, always under suspect, but it's considered truth until proven not to be.
Yeah, it's Strife in the chat actually said it. It has earned its keep by the mere fact that it has earned its keep.
Let me illustrate, guys. Right. So let me illustrate. So if you've kept up with your physics, you know that there are 6 different types of quarks. You've got your up quark, your down, your strange, your charm, your bottom, and top. Okay. So you might have heard this in one of your classes one day. All right.
Yes.
And you believe that there are 6 different types of quarks. Can you tell me the experiments and the things that were involved to secure that knowledge?
I thought it was a Large Hadron Collider, but oh well.
No. This predates that.
Let's go and evaluate your question a little more. First off, if you're asking me if those particular colors in the pictures and the shapes that they're in and all that is true, no. But if you go by what science actually investigates, which is their behavior, the effects they have on one another, the effects that we literally can physically examine in this world, yes, that I do believe.
Okay, I'm just asking if you believe that there are these 6 different types of quarks, and you say you do, and now I'm asking you, okay, do you believe that because you believe the testimony of your physics book and other people, or can you list out the experiments? Do you know the reasons why those people told you that?
Oh, well, it depends. On your example there, I'm still investigating that form of science. So I haven't actually come to a complete conclusion on really what they're talking about. So really, before I say, oh, I believe, I first need to say, do I understand? For example, let's take the idea of the neutron star. I was discussing with my friend Strife the other day. the neutron star. He corrected me on something. I actually didn't understand really the full aspect of a neutron star. Once I did, I was able to say, oh, you know what? Okay, that makes sense to me. I'm actually going to start accepting that, and that
It
he
was
showed
with me, by the way.
Oh, it was. Oh, okay. I'm sorry, Redline. All right, so it was Redline I was talking to then on the neutron star.
But okay, but a second ago you said you do believe that there are 6 types of quarks. So I got past that.
I do believe that is what science teaches. So I must correct myself on
hold
that.
the belief. Okay, well then let me pick another one. Do you believe that Alexander the Great existed?
Oh, yes. Yes.
Okay. Do you know the texts and the so? Do you believe that on grounds of testimony from from trusted sources, or do you actually know why those trusted sources believe Alexander the Great existed? In other words, do you know the texts that testify to his existence? Do you know those reasons?
I'll have to look them up again, but yeah, I've seen the text and read them. Not all of them, obviously.
Well, I haven't.
And
I haven't actually, done any research on Alexander the Great. If someone asked me, did he actually exist, or if he was a figment of character, well, then hello Google.
yeah.
The point is, prior to Googling, you hold the belief, right? You could go Google, right? You're assuming that you could go Google and you could go find the evidence. You could go find out why the experts say that Alexander the Great exists. But the point is, right now, you don't have that evidence. You don't have it at that moment. Nevertheless, at
Then
that
what
moment,
we hold.
Hold on. Nevertheless,
go on.
at that moment, you believe Alexander the Great exists before looking at all that evidence. So why do you believe it? Because you trust in the testimony of experts. They get benefit of the doubt.
No. You're telling us not only, you're saying right now, without examining the testimony of experts, do we believe
No.
it?
I'm saying without examining the reason why the experts believe that Alexander the Great existed.
Well, that would only conclude me to the fallacy that I was posing on you. I would not do that. What I would actually call it is a hypothesis. Hypothesis that they may be correct, but we have to verify it. And until it's actually verified, I'm going to keep them in a hypothesis state. I'm not going to say
Redline, that's nuts, man. You'll go if you really believed that. You wouldn't be able to function in life because so many. I mean, so let's say your doctor says, hold on. Let's say your doctor says to take some kind of medication, right? Or you're told how to operate some type of machinery, or there's so many times when you're just told something is the case and you believe it without looking into the reason for why the individual who told you that believes it himself.
Well, you believe they're not lying.
Hang on.
The first thing you gotta
hang on,
right?
Hang on. Questions for me. Let me see if I can answer.
Oh, fair enough. Go ahead.
All right. Well, in the midst, if they just told me to take something, the first thing that would happen, I'm not going to take their word for it. I'm going to ask them, why do I need to take this? What is this for? That kind of thing. They have to have reasons other than just say, here, take it. And
okay, so let's say he says, oh, look, this is going to help, produce, get the bacteria working in your stomach again. Okay, so he just claims that the pill you're about to take helps do that. Do you believe him when he says that?
Oh, did I go to the doctor for a stomach virus or something like that?
Yes, you did.
Okay, if I went to a doctor for a stomach virus and he was checking me for a stomach virus and he says, here, take this, it might help. You damn well sure, before I put anything in my body that I am not 100% sure, I'm going to actually investigate. I'm going to see if this medication is actually for a stomach virus and not for attention deficit disorder.
I need to have a go on this. Hold on a second. Okay.
Go ahead,
the important thing here is, what are the repercussions for trusting in that? For example, if a guy walked up to me and said, oh, by the way, Bill says hi, I'm not going to yell at them, prove it, and call them out on that. First off, let's assume I know who Bill is, and second, we're going to assume that Bill has in the past told me hi. Okay, now I have a reason to say, oh, well, Bill has done it. It's possible. Why would he lie to me? And if he is lying to me, is it going to hurt me in any way? Not that I know of. So why should I care to even investigate whether he's lying to me or not? I'm not going to care. I'm going to assume he's telling the truth because there's nothing to lose from it, and have a nice conversation with the guy. Now, if the doctor comes to me and he says, take this medicine, it will help you get well, and let's say there was we were in some really weird country where the doctor can do that and poison me, and he could get away with it completely, and no one in my family is going to, benefit from this. There's nothing stopping that doctor from performing this, dangerous act. Well, you know what? No, I'm not going to take that pill. But if I know that the doctor has much to lose from lying to me, and so much so that it'd be just insane for this doctor to lie to me, well, then why would I assume he's lying to me? Especially with the fact that I'm paying him to
So
get
you'll
me
believe
help.
it on authority as long as you're convinced that he's not lying to you.
Well, no. You actually consider whether someone's lying to you or not based on the repercussions. For example, if someone says to you, God told me to tell you that you need to kill your mother, I'm going to say, wait, I don't want my mother dead. The repercussions from this particular act are things I don't like. So I need to be sure that you're telling the truth here.
But
if you're not, there's a problem. If you are lying to me, then you know what? I'm not going to believe what you say. So this is the big thing here. If a guy walks up, if my teacher's teaching me about quarks and teaching me about protons, photons, and virtual particles, and this is all for the sake of me getting maybe a degree in theoretical physics or something, or quantum mechanics, well, I'm going to assume that the money I'm pushing in there is getting me relevant information, because of the fact that if it's not, I have a huge case to sue the school. So I gain from trusting them, no matter what.
Great. So you trust the authorities that tell you these things. Excellent. And it's not irrational either.
Exactly. But
Okay,
if you're
cool.
just trusting it, and there is a negative, effect from being lied to, that's when that fallacy applies.
No, you're kind of adding a point to the fallacy that's not part of the fallacy at all. And it's an informal fallacy. All it is it's a guide. I mean, informal fallacies aren't like rigorous
informal.
like that. The whole idea is that in a debate, you don't want to be people in a debate want to hear the grounding reasons. They want to hear the direct reasons. It's not, but that's not the fundamental reason. For that some authority testifies to something's being true isn't the direct explanation for why that thing is true. So that's why it's an informal fallacy. But no, everybody believes tons of things on the basis of testimony from authorities. You wouldn't be able to function in life if you didn't do this.
Well, it wouldn't just be authority, it's anything.
And going back to what Prag said, and going back to everything, I'm sure there are some people that live their life on assumptions alone, but I decide not to. What I actually do is I like to investigate a little bit further, investigate what this thinks. If a doctor tells me he's going to have a reason, and if that reason coincides with what I'm actually there for, then yeah, maybe just maybe he might be on the right track. But just like Prag say, if I went to this doctor previously, or let's say my family's been going to this doctor for an extended period of time, there's past events backing up the fact that this guy is actually credible in what he says. And so you have two things going for you. One, I went to the doctor for a stomach virus. This doctor is, very credible in the fact that he has been able to provide this service very successfully for my family the last couple of years I've been seeing him. He gives me a medicine which says this for stomach virus right on the bottle. It says it right there. You then have three things going for you that would actually back it up. But where the appeal to authority says is that he has none of that. There is no external other than his word. That is when the fallacy comes into place. When we go to a doctor, there is an external other than his word.
What if you just ask the doctor a simple question that isn't the answer of which isn't written on the bottle? For instance, you ask him, okay, what happens if I accidentally take 2 of these pills? And he says, well, that's actually an interesting question because there have been research done X, Y, Z here. What actually will happen is yada, yada, yada. do you give him benefit of the doubt, or do you not? Do you say, oh, I'm not going to believe that until I investigate it?
Well,
Well, let me ask this.
go ahead.
Rather than using doctor, I'm going to make up a title. It's going to be called the GWOP title. He's a GWOP, and the GWOP said to you that the medicine will do this and that. You're obviously going to say, okay, well, you have a GWOP title. What does that mean to me? There needs to be a reason to trust the title.
He has to be an authority.
Yes. Now, an authority on the subject, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Now, once that's established, you can say, hey, I trust that title. Okay, I trust that your words are going to be valid to me. That you're not going to try to lie to me here. That's fair. That's nothing
Great.
wrong with
Okay,
that,
so
right?
you and me are on the same side. Good.
Yes, on that part. But we also need to say that, well, if the risks are so great, then I might need a little more.
But it's not a fallacy for you to believe something on the grounds of, I mean, look, it may be better, it may be prudent is the word. It may be prudent for you to, when it comes to heavy decisions, not to just base it flippantly on the testimony of a single authority or some such. And that's fine.
That's actually a weak word on that. It's almost just required. If I have a gun to my head and I'm asking the doctor, if I pull the trigger, will it kill me? He'll say, no, it won't kill you, because trust me, I'm a doctor. I work with that. I know about the human body. I know it's not going to kill you. I'm going to be like, yeah, can you, show me the evidence that's, going to show that this is not going to kill me? Because honestly, your word as just a doctor isn't enough, considering the repercussions of pulling the trigger here.
Well, yeah, that's a hard example. I mean, in that example, you're certain that it'll kill you. So no doctor's testimony otherwise. I mean,
why would you ask the question?
If it is evidence, I mean, maybe the doctor will say, look, suppose the doctor said, look, 5% of the people who shoot themselves in the head actually, end up surviving. And let's say you have reason to believe that he would know this, so this is like his area of expertise or something, and he testifies this to you, and you know that, and you've got no reason to doubt him, then he might say, look, it might not kill you, and you could, I don't think you'd be irrational for giving him benefit of the doubt in that case.
If it's Cheeky actually said it best. If it's dangerous to go against the doctor's advice, you'll make sure you know what you're on about first. That's
fine.
That's
prudent. That's prudent.
Basically what it comes to is that we're going to this doctor with the assumptions that we never seen this doctor before. He has no record of actually. This is a guy on the side of the street that we've never seen before. Well, you treat him just like any other stranger.
No, it's an authority, an appeal to an authority, so it has to be a recognized authority.
No, because that's only if I'm trying to convince you of a claim.
Yeah.
You ask me why should I trust you? And I say, because this doctor says so.
That's an appeal to authority.
Not if I say, or if I'm asking the doctor, hey, let's see, will this hurt me or not? I've already established trust. So he's not trying to convince me of any claim there. He's simply telling me an answer to my question. Now, if I were to ask him, hey, why should I trust your word in the first place? And he says, because I have a PhD. I'll be like, what does that mean? And he'll explain it to me. Boom. I now have reason to trust him.
Well, I'm not giving you...
But that has nothing, again, to do with appeal to authority. That's just him giving his reasons to why I should trust him. Now, if he said, you should trust me because this doctor over here says you should trust me, that would be an appeal to authority.
And that's exactly what we're going on in this example. And so what I want to do is I want to shift the tracks to get right back on topic here. When I meet you on the street and you tell me that the mere thought, whatever thought I did tell you, I forgot the exact example I gave, but a bad thought would be actually immoral, and I ask you why, and you say because so-and-so said so, and I respond in saying, oh, but that's just an appeal to an authority. what would you what would you reply in that?
This is an epistemological question. The question is, why think that it's wrong to lust after a woman? And my answer, what's a reason for thinking that? And my reason is that I've got good reasons to think that Jesus is trustworthy, and with respect that he knows, that he's informed on what is actually right and actually wrong, and he's got no reason to lie. If you want to add in that, and he testifies. I've got good reasons to think he's historically testified to its being wrong. So
And now we get to these set of questions you're going to hate.
Mhm.
And if you don't really want to go on this, that's fair enough. I'm not going to force you to. But now we got to establish why you consider Jesus to be a figure of authority that you can trust, and how this figure of authority was established in the first place.
It gets right down to nitty-gritty at this point.
Yeah. Now, that goes completely off the main topic. But the overall point here was the fact that unless you honestly yourself can establish that Jesus really is a true, worthy authority in the matter, there would be no reason to just assume he is. You really need to think about it and ask yourself whether or not these texts are telling the truth or not. And honestly, when it goes back to morality, I just don't see any real connection with morality truly being based upon, honestly, an authority. It just doesn't make sense. Because once again, we've established that there's more to it than just authority. Authority needs to be established by other means of verification, more meaningful. This authority is such a weak bit of verification. So, okay.
No, I think Jesus is a reliable source of information. I've got good reasons for thinking that. So, I mean, if I don't so I'm going to give Jesus' testimony benefit of the doubt. My good reasons are that I've got good reasons for thinking that God resurrected Jesus from the dead, that he vindicated Jesus as his messenger. So, so when Jesus says something, that's a good reason to stand up and listen.
Yes, and as soon as something contradicts Jesus, correct, would you start to doubt that Jesus is, God and all that?
Like, what kind of thing? Like, what do you mean?
If Jesus said something that went against what you think is moral.
Oh, right. Then well, I mean, for most of the sayings of Jesus, I think there's pretty good evidence for most of them that the historical Jesus actually said those things, much more so than there is historical evidence that God said things in the Old Testament. So with respect to those things, those are pretty good. I mean, it's possible that they could be overridden, but it would be pretty hard. So I'm going to say that the New Testament documenting of Jesus' statements on what is right and wrong are really good evidence, as far as I'm concerned, for their rightness and wrongness. But that doesn't mean they're impossible to override. I mean, if Jesus had said that we ought to, rape each other, torture, rape each other, then I would say, that's obviously. I mean, there's no way Jesus would say that. I'd have to make a choice. I'd have to say, okay, well, obviously Jesus isn't a messenger of God because God wouldn't command that. It wouldn't work. I could say God doesn't exist, or I could say that this text doesn't represent what the historical Jesus actually said. Probably the last thing I'd do is conclude that, this is what I actually ought to do. The second...
Redline, I'm sorry, I'm just noting Redline. Can you examine the chat for me for a second?
Yes, I can.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so continue. I'm sorry, Gnarly. I just noticed a lot of activity going on in the chat. I just wanted to make sure that we were monitoring it. So anyways, okay. We're going to make the establishment that, Jesus is a reliable authority to you. So we're not going to go in circles on that one. And I think it's only fair because, honestly, it's not what the show's about. At least the topic right now is not about that.
Yeah.
the issues come into how your morality is established. And from what I've gathered, it's established purely on two things. Your consciousness, which you have not really identified how your consciousness works, and the authority of God, and you gain that through the Bible. Am I correct so far on this?
Yeah, that's the epistemological question you're asking. How do I discern? There are these right and wrong things out there. How do we determine what is right and what is wrong? How do we discover that what is right and right is wrong? And my answer is right, those two things, the conscience and testimony from reliable figures like Jesus and Paul.
Okay. Now, we've addressed the issue that, the reliable authority, or that the authoritative figures does have a flaw in it if you don't have a conscience, correct? That, they could tell you to do anything and you'll do it purely on the trust that they're, who they are. I'm pretty sure you agree with that, right?
Well,
if you don't have a conscience.
If by flaw you just mean like it's not certain, it's not guaranteed.
It's prone to cause bad results.
Well, if by prone you mean it's more likely to produce bad results than good results, then no, I don't agree that it's prone to produce bad results. The whole reason I trust in it,
not more
the whole reason I trust in it is because I think it's prone to produce good results. I trust in an authority because I think an authority, is more likely to, testifying on something that he's an authority on. He says, look, everybody in my field believes X, Y, Z. I'm going to go ahead and give him benefit of the doubt, and also believe that. Because I think he's prone to tell the truth there.
Just to clarify, I understand that that you do look at the benefits. That's good. I'm just stating that there are, even though it might be minute, there is the possibility that a situation could arise where a bad result will come from that you have placed your trust in the wrong authority. Correct?
Right. Yes. Correct.
And so you use your consciousness to examine it and as sort of your fail-safe. To prevent such occurrences from happening, correct?
No, they're just two independent pieces of evidence is all. It's not like one precedes the other or anything like that. I mean, there could be situations. I gave you a situation where, for instance, my conscience could, again, if the text said something that was like, insanely, that my conscience just said clearly was wrong, then it's in virtue of the strength of my conscience. That I would believe that something went awry with the text, either the transmission of the text or either Christianity isn't true or all those options that I listed before. Alternatively, I could suppose I have guaranteed reason to believe that God exists, that God resurrected Jesus, that God vindicated Jesus, and that Jesus is an authority in this respect, that Jesus wasn't lying, and that the texts in question I have unbeatable, virtually proof-worthy, a virtually proof-worthy case that this Jesus testified that something is wrong. If I'm certain that Jesus testified to something's being wrong, then, and my conscience was only kind of strong against the things being morally permissible, but Jesus is over here saying it's wrong anyways, then I'm going to go with what the text says. So both of them are there, and you just kind of have to figure out which one is stronger at any given point.
Yeah. Now, back to, well, I'm afraid I'm going to be going in circles, because again, you're still evaluating the process in which this factory or conscience is producing objects or moral decisions, or moral values, how it actually does this, what is it weighing. And now, okay, because you're not really establishing this, I'm seeing really not what I call a strong moral system you got here. A lot of Christians would claim that morality only comes from God, and that some atheists are they're immoral because they don't have God on their side.
Here, wait. Let me stop you. Remember how I distinguished three things? You've been asking lately, the past few times, how do we come? There are already facts out there of right and wrong, is what I've said, and that our coming to discover what those are is an epistemological process. How do we discover the right from the wrong? But when Christians say that, look, atheists can't ground the right and the wrong, when you talk about moral systems, you're not talking about epistemology. You're talking about a different issue. You're talking about the ontology. You're talking about, and in terms of ontology, in terms of right and wrong, I am a divine command theorist. That means I think that what it is to be wrong, not what it means, but what it is constitutionally to be wrong, is to violate a command of God, to be something God commands us not to do.
Fair enough. But it's still, because you have not established how you can reliably tell if God is commanding you or not, seems to be a very, well, unreliable moral system versus, well, what a lot of atheists go by. They go by usually empathy, the moral rule, the idea that, well, obviously, if I don't want it to happen to me, I shouldn't be doing it to them. They go a lot by the idea that, a group, morality forms in the groups. The idea, not all atheists do this, but the ones I've met do this. The idea that a group wants to survive as a group, so they develop a morality, a way that they can work together well and survive as a group without having to make these absurd trade-offs. I use this analogy that if a guy is running, or if two guys are hunting down a beast, and the one guy says to the other guy, hey, you go distract it, and then as it's chasing after you, I'm going to go kill it, while its guard is down. No moral system within that group. One guy's going to be like, what's to stop you from letting it kill me and then you killing it during that situation, you getting all the rewards. Whereas if morality standard in place, he would say, oh, well, obviously he's not out just to kill me. He's going to actually kill it, and I can form a trust with him, because obviously it would be wrong for him to just let me die. The group can't survive that way. And so the guy says, okay, yeah, no trade-off has to be. The moral code was established in literally keeping that group alive. These are concrete evaluations that people can describe to show that, hey, this system works, and here's how it works. That, to me, makes sense. I can demonstrate it, whereas your system doesn't. Your system just says, oh, well, God tells me to. Well, how do you know, that is God? Well, I have trust in that this is Jesus. How do you know you have trust that this is Jesus? It's on text. Have you actually seen Jesus? No. I just know that all these texts are deemed reliable. It goes very much into these historical claims. And to me, wow, on such an issue called morality, that's really flimsy at best.
Well, I don't think it's flimsy when I say that something is morally wrong. For instance, I've got the things we've been talking about today, for instance. I think I've got good reasons for believing that they're wrong. Now, you're right that I'm not certain. I'm rarely certain, but that's fine. I'm not certain of most of my beliefs. But it's important to also note that you're using a very different conception of morality here. I don't even know if you'd say that the morality that you just referred to a moment ago is objective. And most importantly of all is I think that your notion of morality, as just being whatever, works out, in terms of survival of the people who behave in that way, is very counterintuitive. It's something that most people would say, wait a second, that's not right at all. Look at all these crazy counterexamples that doesn't fit at all with what we're trying to get at when we talk about, moral, the moral life.
What seems counterintuitive, if I may ask?
So, the pragmatic, the idea that you were positing a second ago, that the something is wrong. Here, fill this in. X is wrong, just in case.
If my group is not going to survive because of this particular action, that's immoral. That action would be immoral.
Hurts the group.
Yeah.
We can.
If a guy walks into the middle of a group and says, "Oh, this is a bomb. Should I set it off?" We're going to say no.
It goes like this. When we were talking about, the group, answer this. In a society where people are consistently killing each other, isn't it safe to say that society would not live long?
Yep.
All right, so in a society where people actually learn to help one another, that society will eventually prosper. or is going to prosper.
Yep.
Okay, so if we can say that, so the society that obviously was killing a bunch of people, we can learn from their mistakes, and basically this is a big Darwin thing, survival of the fittest in a sense. This system obviously worked, so that system is all that's left. That's how we come to the moral standards that we have. The system worked when it was helping others, not hurting others.
So, I mean, when you're talking about helping others, you mean like in terms of their survival. It's better for their survival, and it's better for the group's survival.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, you can even go on so an example, just going off that Darwinism thing you spoke of is eugenics. Does that mean, suppose that you could show that if you killed, you killed people who would introduce, mutations into the human gene pool, that long term this would be better for, the human race. Does that mean it's okay to kill those people or to prevent them from reproducing?
For the group?
Yeah.
Same for the group? Yeah, if they truly think that that's the best way. Then they would consider it morally
not
correct.
the best way, because the best way is presupposed. I mean, I don't think it's the best way. But the question is whether if it's the good, if it's good. So the group agrees
your objection is flawed, because I'm not saying that it is the good way. I said if they think it's the good way, or the best. I'm sorry, the best way. That.
Well, and by best way you mean it's best for the group's survival.
Yes.
Okay.
If they believe that is truly the best for the group's survival, it will be considered morally correct.
When you can look at another thing like stem cell research, I heard there's a big controversy of that. Do you know how many people that could actually help? People who are paraplegic can walk again. People who can't see can see. That's a big hot topic going on right now, and I, for one, am a big supporter of stem cells, because look at all of the good that could have come from it. It's not in any malicious intent. It's actually for the betterment of the society.
Well, I mean, obviously, people who disagree say, yeah, but you have to murder people in order to make it happen. But let's not get into that, because I don't want to get into a discussion whether anybody gets, whether a fetus is a person or anything like that.
Okay.
Let's go back to the
Fair enough.
eugenics example. A lot of people are going to say that's absurd. Even if the human race, is more fit as a product of employing eugenics, eugenics is nevertheless wrong. In fact, Red, this goes kind of back to, the other time that I was on the show when we talked about deontological, views of morality, where, we talked about the trolley case. It would seem like, it's better for the groups, for some particular human societies in general, if, for me to save the 5 by killing the 1. But a lot of people are going to say, no, I should not push the fat man over the bridge to save the 5. I would be a killer. I would be a murderer. It's wrong. So I mean, there's all sorts of examples where I could list more examples, but you might see them coming. The whole idea is you've got all these situations where you don't have the right to do some action, even if the action is better for the human society, for the human race, in some small part. You don't have the right to do it because it might involve, torturing someone else or killing someone else, when you don't have the right to do that.
When we're talking about, the trolley problem is only to show that morality isn't simple, like Atheism TV said. It's not simple. We realize that. That's why we're having these discussions. But in the sense, it may be very difficult for a person to push over the fat man to save the 5. But if you had the opportunity and didn't take it, you wouldn't be a murderer of 1. You'd be a murderer of 5.
Yeah, and you could say that.
Go ahead.
Wait, you could also say that. Oh, you saved the 5. And the 1 died, and that 1 you later find out happened to be the guy who knew the cure to this disease that was ultimately going to kill everybody, and then people are going to say, well, that was morally wrong. Why did you let that 1 guy die? And it's going to go into, the idea of, well, I didn't know he had that, and they'd say, well, you didn't know, and this is where the whole analogy starts to fall apart, or I guess thought experiment, that ultimately if everything's blank, if everything is equal, each person is literally equal to the other person, then obviously you save the 5, not the 1. But individuals are not all equal. We're not all equal people. Some people are smarter than others. Some people are stronger than others. Some people hold more responsibility than others, or have some sort of charisma or something that shows to give them that advantage over another human being. And honestly, if I had a choice between two people where one guy's a druggie who's never worked a job in his life sitting in the corner, and the other guy is a scientist who has also donated much of his money to charity and has done a bunch of great things, I'm obviously going to say, yeah, I'm saving the scientist. And people would say, well, that's morally fine, right?
So
is that
right,
morally acceptable, right?
Sure. I know what you're getting at. So let's assume that everybody in this trolley example are of equal value to the society.
Okay.
Save the 5.
Save the 5.
Well,
very easy. There's no dispute.
You say that's easy, but most people would not push over the fat man. They say you don't have... Here's the difference, is if you pushed over the fat man, you would murder him, whereas if you didn't push over the fat man, you would not have murdered the 5 because you didn't cause their death. You weren't in that causal chain.
No, you may not have been in the causal chain that led to a series of events that would eventually kill the people, but still, the ball was still passed in your court. You not doing anything is still, in a sense, doing something. You contributed in that way. You contributed in you not doing anything to those people dying.
That's not... Look, let's say this actually happened and we went to court right now. Nobody would say that I was a murderer because I didn't push the fat man over when I knew I could have. Nobody.
Of course,
educated gadfly wants to join the conversation.
Oh, okay. Educated gadfly. Finally, somebody who decides to call in every once in a while. So, yeah, you hear that, Atheism TV? People who want to call in. Thank you.
What?
Redline V8 on Skype. Representing. Yes. This involves speaking. Thank you. Hey, gadfly, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
All right, got something to contribute?
Okay, for the trolley experiment, the utilitarianists would have no problem pushing over the fat man because it would save a net gain of 4 people. Now, Atheism TV suggests, no, because you don't know everything about those people. So he's suggesting that different people have different values of life. So let's say, does the drug addict have less worth of his life than, say, the climatologist? That's a different issue. If we say, well, no, both their lives are equal, then Atheist TV's example means nothing, because is life valuable, regardless of how it is lived?
Of course it's valuable, and it's valuable only in a very vague sense. Other than that, it gains value based on how a person lives their life. Yeah. So
is a drug addict's life less valuable than the life of a Nobel Prize winning physicist?
I would say so, yes.
Well, okay, then that's a different issue. Then Atheist TV has an example. But especially the Christians, the theists in general, I would say no, all life is equally. They would quote the Declaration of Independence: "All men are created equal." So the drug addict would be created equal to the nuclear physicist, and therefore you don't have to worry about this whole. You don't have to worry about what Atheism TV is suggesting. You would still save a net. You would have a net. You would save a net of 4 people, 4 lives, and if that's your only goal is to save lives, period, then kill the fat man. But now let's say, what if the trolley was filled with 5, with 1 rapist and a murderer, a drug addict,
William
cyber hacker.
Lane Craig. I don't know. I'm kidding.
Well, put it this way: if we fill the trolley with 5 people of ill repute, and say the fat man is this great man who's a philanthropist in journal, and
he was a guy trying to catch
guys, I want to kind of get on here. Ocelot sent me a message saying that he is kind of worn out, and I quite honestly can understand because I'm
fair.
worn out myself. So,
Okay.
Ocelot, I want to give you the opportunity to make any closing statements that you may have, and then of course we'll bid you adieu.
Well,
Okay.
the end would be if you're saying that life itself is not equal, then you have to demonstrate it.
Gadfly,
You
Gadfly,
have to
Gadfly,
demonstrate. I'm
Gadfly,
finishing that the Nobel
Gadfly.
Prize physicist is.
I said shut up. Ocelot, you have the floor.
That was
All right,
awesome.
thanks, man. Yeah, so I mean, normally when you make I guess, sort of a close, you're supposed to draw it back to the main discussion. So we kind of had to define, what a thought crime was, and in the end, I guess we wanted to talk about um, uh, a, uh, a mental process, and whether a purely subjective mental process could be something that's wrong, and I wanted to say that no, it's not. And I guess we never really, that trailed into a bunch of conversations about, how I know what is wrong. And I guess we never really got to the end of it. But anyways, regardless, guys, I appreciate the conversation. It was fun. And I look forward to doing it again.
All
Well,
right.
before you leave, I did want to say a few things. First off, from what I got from the show, you obviously have a well-developed morality in the sense you do, from your examples of what you choose in our experiments, etc., have a good moral code. And while I do question whether you truly understand where that moral code came from and how it developed, I will not regard you as like an immoral person. You actually show to be very intelligent and very. You seem to be thinking about these things quite a lot. So thank you for being on the show. I don't want to have it so that as you leave, you come across as not any of these things. You really do.
Oh, yep.
So
And so for me, of course, I'd also want to thank you. And of course, if you know anyone else that possibly wants to be on, please send them my Skype contact information so we can talk about it so that they can be on future shows as well. And as always, we're open to anyone coming on as long as they actually shut up when they're supposed to, Gadfly. And
call
so
them back
yes,
when
I'll call him
necessary.
back afterward. But yeah, other than that, I'm not going to end on the bad note. I just want to end on a good note and say thank you very much for being on, and I really do appreciate you taking the time out of your life to be here.
Yeah,
Awesome,
thanks.
guys. It was fun.
All
Thanks.
right,
Yeah,
peace
was.
out.
Later.
All right then. So someone else wants to come in just roughly. So let me see if this guy has anything to say about this here issue. Because he said he might want to come in, but he might not. But we'll see what happens. Blah, blah, blah.
Okay.
Hello, Quinn. How's it going?
Hey,
Yep,
I'm good.
got anything
So introduce yourself,
that-
Quinn.
Oh, yeah, introduce yourself first. Thank you.
Well, there's not much to say. I'm Quinn. I've been I don't know, kind of listening in, and I've been kind of trying to introduce myself into the community of people who discuss these things on a regular basis.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I don't have any channel or anything in this subject. So,
You're going to have
Don't
to
worry,
change
I don't
that.
either.
Both of you are going to
yeah,
have to change that. How dare you?
yeah, I suppose.
Oh, you supposed no. You have to change that. That way we can properly promote you. Then I could play your show or I could play your videos on my show. That'd be pretty awesome. You know what I'm saying? This is a tag
Yeah,
team
yeah,
effort. So,
yeah.
but anyway, as for what we're going on, got anything to add or contribute? Got something to say? Something that's been bugging you?
I mean, I don't know. I think when you guys were talking about the example of the trolley and the fat man, I guess I would say I would adopt the utilitarian view and say that it's justified in pushing the fat man off to save the other five. And I do think that if you look at the people specifically, and I mean, like the drug addict and the scientist, I think there is some importance, even though that kind of sounds bad. Um, depending on what the type of person is.
Well,
So
it would be I use something called the mind collapse example. You have a series of people in this mine, but you only have enough food to feed four of them, and there's six of them. You have a kid, an old lady, a doctor, a scientist, a mathematician, and stuff, and they go over a series of people. You would naturally feed the people who can benefit society later on in life, or who have not lived their life, who are more valuable. Now, obviously, the doctor is going to be valuable. If there's any injuries, he's got to be there. You're obviously going to save the kid because, they haven't lived their life yet. They have more
Yeah.
potential. You're not going to save the old lady because she's already lived her life. She's 90 years old. She's crapping in diapers for sakes. In fact, the only
Yeah.
reason she was in the mine to begin with was because she wandered off from the nursing home because her Alzheimer's disease kicked in.
Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
You might have an old lady fetish, but
Yeah.
Yeah,
And people might say that they don't pass this judgment. I think it's inevitable for people to pass judgment like this, and they kind of rank the importance of people in situations like this. I think it's pretty much inevitable.
Yeah, so based on that, I would say that, if you knew the value to begin with, you can then, you have the time to make the conclusions of who to save and when. But
Yeah.
if in the trial example, it's a split-second decision. You have 5 lives opposed to 1. Now, for all you know, those 5 lives could be absolute horse crap. They could be potheads that would never amount to anything in life, and the fat man could have been a brilliant scientist that could have found the cure for cancer. But it is a sudden decision that you have to make, and by a mathematical fact that you have a better chance of one of those idiots growing up to be something successful than the fat man who might die 5 minutes later from a heart problem.
Yeah, exactly.
So you make that choice right there without any knowledge of what those people will actually amount to in any way. So
Yeah.
that's what I would say, and that's why what I would say I would be perfectly justified by pushing over the fat man, or I would be perfectly justified killing the old lady that's crapping in a diaper that has Alzheimer's disease.
okay.
Yeah. I would
So
agree.
Quinn, I want to hear your thoughts. Sorry, Redline.
Meh.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. With the guests and everything, I would say, yeah, he kind of, I don't know. It makes sense what he's trying to say, but I think, though it would completely merge the topic, he really has to be able to justify why it's moral authority for him, and I think he would come across some problems if he went into that discussion, and I think that's really where the whole conversation should lie, is the premise. So, yeah.
Okay, so now I'm going to invite Strife because Strife wants to be on.
I was about to tell Strife to hold, but nope. Go on.
What do you want, Strife?
What?
Sup, punk?
Go ahead, Quinn.
I'm good. You can talk.
No. Quinn, did you have anything, any insights? I mean, I understand you said
Insights to thought crime. What's your take on thought crime, or a
Like-
thought being evil, and that kind of thing?
I don't think thought crime is essentially evil if it's not producing any evil.
Thank you.
Yay!
Yes.
So, yeah.
All right, Strife. What you want?
How about, since the show's pretty much over almost, how about just as a statement for the next show? How about the next show is like viewer for the viewers? So
What
this
do you mean?
Oops.
We can discuss that later, but... Oh, wait.
Yes, I have no idea what happened there. But the show is not over until I say it's over, Strife. That is the thing.
You
No.
just kicked him.
Yes, I just kicked him. But
He
yes,
is bad.
now
No, I'm
now we'll see if Educated Gadfly can come back on, and then we'll see if we can invite Strife back on, because he's probably peed at me.
you suck.
Yeah, what are you going to do about it? Come at me, bro.
Come at me,
Where do you
bro.
live? And I will.
Yes, so anyway.
I do know where you live.
Yeah, so
I just nuked the state of Florida. That'll get you.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh, I'm
Is this
scared.
Quinn the Eskimo? Just curious.
No.
Okay, it's an old song. I just wanted to ask that.
Oh, yeah, I know the song.
All right.
I know
Anyway.
it's okay.
All right. So as far as thought crime go, thank you, Quinn, because you've just you've said what we've been saying this entire night.
Yeah.
And you know what's awesome about it, though? When you say it like that, it makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It honestly does.
Don't need to put so much emphasis on explaining the thought process because it's not relevant.
2 hours and 30 minutes of explanation, and you just said perfectly within the course of 5 seconds. It is absolutely fucking awesome.
Where's my Nobel Prize?
To be fair, we do have a common agreement here, so that might be the bias on our decision.
Yeah, of course, there is.
Might.
But of course, as always, also, Strife, did you have something to say other than the show is not over? So I say it's
Okay, how was I supposed to... Okay, fine. I'm good. I'll wait.
So, RD, you were on this awesome speed. It was fluent. I understood what you're saying, and then you got cut off because some dick decided to just cut you off there. But I was loving it. Continue.
Hey, Prag, fuck you.
Oh, okay. Later.
Well, the whole question goes to the question, is life valuable by life itself, or do we as humans give extra meaning to life by what we do with it? And, well, if we go with the Declaration of Independence, life is equal no matter whom. So the issue is, like on The Dark Knight Rises, would you vote to blow up the prisoner ship? Even though they're prisoners, would you still blow them up to save yourself?
Save myself?
Yeah, have you not seen
the movie? Of
the movie?
course I would.
Yeah,
If
I remember it
just thinking
correctly,
about-
there's...
Wait. Can I go on something with what RD said?
Sure.
About, when we see, people's lives equally?
Sure.
I don't think we actually do. Because if you think about it, what defines someone's life more than someone else's?
Well, I think in the trolley example that we're saying, where you actually have time to, evaluate everyone's worth, but in an instant where you have to make a split decision, you go for the one that yields a better result. So if one fat guy has to be sacrificed to save 5 potentials, so you have 1 potential versus 5 potentials, you're going to pick the 5. There's more potential there. That's what we're saying. But if you have time to actually evaluate, such as the mind collapse example I gave, you would obviously go for the doctor, the scientist, the child that hasn't lived their life yet, and you would in a sense sacrifice the old lady that's crapping in a bag having Alzheimer's.
Let's spice it up a bit. All right? These 5 kids they're dying of some horrible skin-eating disease, and they're pretty much close to dying. And the fat guy is pretty damn healthy, and he just donates tons of money to these great companies that just provide us great food. Despite the fact he might have a heart attack in a few years in the future, he's going to live a lot longer than these kids. Now, make your decision.
Off with the kids.
Yeah, I mean, most people, I would assume, would go with what result yields the most benefits.
Gain.
And if
Yeah.
the kids are going to...
I would consider humane because, if the kids are going to die of a flesh-eating disease, might as well put them out of their misery now. I mean,
Thank you. I was waiting for someone to get that.
Seriously, it's like, what the hell? No, put them out of their misery now.
Well, unless you have something against fat people, I guess. Could be.
You push the fat guy in front of the train, and you just keep driving the train.
I guess. I mean, it's whatever yields the better result, and if they're going to die anyway, then why go through the process of actually pushing over the fat guy and going whoops? I mean, I guess, yes, Atheism TV. I am racist against flesh-eating bacteria. Is that a race?
I don't think you would qualify as a race, but you're being speciesist.
I'm being speciesist, yes.
He's against those zombies in Resident Evil 5.
Yeah, I'm
humans
being...
naturally speciesist? Isn't that, how we survive?
That's what I was trying to argue, yeah. We are.
Yeah,
Actually, this reminds me of...
our species than a cat or a dog or a tree.
I'm speciesist, therefore I will not eat.
There we go. Okay, so being that everything is a show and we have everything to discuss in our closing statements with me and Prag, I am going to...
Okay, I'll call Redline over a cute little puppy any day.
Yes, we'll go with that. Oh, you know what? Fuck you. Okay.
Kick
So,
him.
yes.
Yes.
So Quinn,
All right.
I
nothing.
just want to say one more thing.
Hang on, Quinn. Nothing against you, but the show is about to end, so I'm going to have to boot ya. So thanks for coming
Yeah.
on.
You're welcome. Thanks.
Gadfly, say
This
what you
also-
gotta say.
This type of morality that we're talking about is also represented in the movie I, Robot, where the robot saves Will Smith's life due to his chance of being more higher of surviving and recovering than the little girls. So the robots left the little girl to die, basically, because she didn't have a high probability of being saved.
Got it.
Hmm.
All right. Thanks, Gadfly.
Sweet.
Adios.
The show is ending.
The
Yes.
show is ending. Yes.
After nearly 3 hours. Yeah. Anyways.
Yes, of course. So, Prag, you have a final statement you would like to make, I am guessing.
Well, yes. Considering my absence and a lot of these shows, or at least quietness, I am happy to have contributed at least somewhat in this show. I am thankful for all our guests. It's been wonderfully fun. And honestly, I think that if we can just continue to sort of... I just think the show's going great so far. If we can just continue the way we're going, we got something really good going on here. So.
I totally agree. I also want to end up in thanking everyone that actually came on, including the people I kicked, even though they hate my guts right about now. And I just want to say, if I did hurt their feelings in any way by kicking them, tough shit. But it's okay. So what we're actually want to go on, by this is I'm just going to conclude with my final thoughts. Obviously, the idea of a thought crime is very, potent because all of a sudden it gets into mind control, which is, in my sense, very dictator-ish when it comes to the people who enforce these laws. It's very dictatorish. How can you or how can anyone control a mind? That is really, really effed up. Am I am I alone in thinking that it's really effed up to think that mind control is wrong?
No.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
I do disagree with you. But no, it's not irrational. It's not messed up.
And the show will continue for another hour. Why do you disagree with me?
Well, mind control, in a sense, is sort of automatic in the sense that in order to incorporate someone into your society, you do need to brainwash them, in a sense, into commercials.
Well,
Sorry.
what brainwash? I would like to stop. It's not brainwash. It would be convincing. There's still free will. Brainwashing would be, doing something.
You're meaning like complete and total control over one's mind.
Yes, correct.
Oh.
I'm talking about like putting a device on your skull that makes you want to. I assume you're completely straight, right? You have a wife and everything.
Oh yeah, I got a wife and stuff.
Okay, good. You have a wife. Then that would be like me placing a device on your head that makes you have sex with another woman. That's what I'm.
Obviously.
There we go. So okay, good. The show will not continue for another 2 hours because I think we've just straightened something out. But yeah,
But you did bring up the opposite though, in a sense that what if someone liked to rape people, so you controlled their minds to force them to do something better, and maybe even force them into a situation that could help them.
Still mind control, still wrong. Because you are then getting out free will, so in a sense you are playing God. So I'll end it like this.
But
I'm
playing an unknown? I don't understand. No, I'm kidding. Okay.
Okay, good.
Yeah, the show's got to end. The
Good.
show has got to end.
Good, then you will agree with me for the remainder of the show. We have, thought crime as a really taboo subject simply because of the fact that of the mind control sense. Mind control being paired as evil in many shows that I can think of. If you want to go to the Dr. Evil scenario, it would be just like that, only it'd be a lot more funnier.
Smoke,
exactly. Are you smoking yet?
yet?
Exactly. So in that case, I see it as really, really wrong, and I do not agree with it. And so I consider, a mere thought, not as evil. I don't see it as evil, and I don't see it as moral. I see it as such a null point, and it's not even worth mentioning. So in a sense, if you were to say this abstract concept was moral and immoral, the question then would be, is number 5 moral or immoral? And on that bombshell, it is time to end. And
Yes.
now that I think about it, I'm going to extend it an extra 2 minutes because we got to do the rant.
The rant.
The rant.
The rant.
And so I will now finish by ranting about something. All right, listen.
Okay.
Traffic. We all know that traffic is there, and we deal with it every day on a daily basis. This is what makes driving a little bit less enjoyable. But it is the people that cause that traffic for the wrong reason. If
They're
you
called
are
stupid.
driving 30 miles an hour in a 55 miles an hour, then you're an asshole. Period.
Fuck them.
You have no right to be doing 30 miles an hour in the fucking hammer lane. Move the hell over, otherwise I'm going to tailgate your ass. And don't be brake checking me either, because that makes you even more of a dick. What the fuck do I have to do to actually get some goddamn peace and quiet when I'm driving without dealing with inconsistent cons that
bulldozer,
can't even
man.
shit the fuck? Is that 2 minutes?
Yeah.
That was 2 minutes. All right, guys. Peace out, Girl Scouts. This is the Line Go Show, and we will see you next week. Peace.
Next week? It's so long.